the meeting. Matthew just answered my question. We're all good with the electronic. So we're hybrid right now. We have participants who can join us online. We've got participants in the room today. And so as a part of kind of before we kick off the meetings, we can just take a roll call for the board members who are present.
Right. Seth Roy,
Here.
Michael Aronson here, Nina Aaron, Robert Gallagher, Ulysses Castillo,
Here.
Eric Talbot, Isabel Nugent, sorry, Brenda Burback here, and then Carla Christine.
Carla's not here. All right, so we have three members absent and one alternate absent. So Brenda, you'll be eligible to vote today. And actually all the business that we're looking at today is new business, so we don't have to talk about any older projects which you may or may not have been here for any of the deliberations. So all right, so with that, I think the first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the December meeting. Do we have enough people here? Because I know that two of you are not at that meeting, so that means we only have three, so we actually cannot vote on those minutes today. So we'll table that till our next meeting. If Bobby shows up by the end of the meeting, then we can maybe revisit that at the end of the agenda. Okay, and joining us right now is Linda Whitehead. So Linda, we're just getting started. All right, we were advised that you might be a little late. All the seats have shifted around. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it. The first item on the agenda, like looking at my minutes from last week, that's not right. Is 2 Church Street, which is a planning board 02/2023 and VAR 02/2023. So if we can have the applicant maybe come, and if there's any materials that you wanted to share, I guess you're controlling everything, Maddie, and you can put everything up on the screen as you go. And if you can introduce yourself as you come up.
Thank you. Jerry Tortorella from Hoffman, Tortorella and Wexstein. We're counsel for Open Door Family Medical Center. And with me this evening, we have a few people in the audience, and then we may have people who are zooming in. So I don't know if we can tell who's on there or not.
They're all right here.
Okay. I have to put my glasses on to be able to do that. Let me introduce the people who are in the audience first. So from Open Door, we have Lindsay Farrell, who's the Chief Executive Officer and the President of Open Door, and Michelle Leway, who's the Senior Director of Capital Projects. We have Chuck Utchick from Langdon, who is here this evening, and we should have Mike Tucker, who's tuned in through Zoom. And they're both working as civil engineers, site and civil engineers on the project. And then Rob Masters from Canon should be on. Do we see him?
I see both of those folks.
Okay, even with my glasses, I can't read that. So thank you for
Only because I'm real close.
yeah, okay. So Rob Masters is on as well. And Rob is with Canon. He's a principal of Canon. He's an architect and is working with Open Door on its space planning, facilities planning, and architectural design. So we appreciate being here this evening. Happy New Year to everybody. It's nice to see people in person. We are very excited to be here. We know it's an exciting time for the village as it's doing its revitalization, downtown revitalization initiative. Open Door is actually embarking on its own revitalization initiative as it's looking into going into the next several decades and what the needs are of Open Door in order to continue to provide services to its patients and to also residents of the community. And, you know, when Open Door took a look at what its needs are going forward, it's had a long and strong relationship with Ossining. And one of the things that it wanted to make sure it would do was stay in Ossining if it could. And under the leadership of Lindsay and Michelle, and with the assistance of Rob and Chuck and Mike, it has figured out a way to redirect and reposition its existing space in Ossining in order to meet the medical needs and the primary care needs and specialty needs of its patients within Ossining. And that's what brings us to the board this evening. We are starting off with a renovation for 2 Church Street. It has been an office building for many years. Open Door has occupied that space for many years, but it acquired the building in 2019. And its plan is to do what I would describe as somewhat minor, modest renovations to the exteriors and do two, not too large additions onto the building. And then to do some site improvements and some additional parking and handicap parking in the rear of the building. And also to try to make some improvements aesthetically and functionally vis-a-vis the Croton Aqueduct, the old Croton Aqueduct. Right? We really want to open up and make a better connection to the aqueduct. And you'll hear about that in a little while. So we come before the board this evening, we need site plan approval from the board, architectural review approval. You'll hear a little bit about our parking situation. We are 6 spaces short of our parking requirement under the code. But the parking facility has functioned without issue in all of the years that Open Door has been there. And as I said, it acquired the property in 2019, but it had occupied substantial portions of the building prior to that. There are other conditions that are existing, but for which we require variances in order to continue. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the site plan. So we're here this evening to make an initial presentation. We want to show you the architecture because we're very excited about that as well. And then talk to you about moving this application forward, getting the referral out to the county, hopefully referring us to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And, as we work on the other open issues that we need to address as part of the approval process. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Lindsay Farrell, who will just speak briefly about Open Door's mission, and then we'll get into the architecture and the site plan.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Lindsay Farrell. I live at 19 Davids Lane in Austining. And as I was thinking about speaking to you tonight, it occurs to me that I have been on Main Street since 1983. That is a very, very long time. And I was sort of going up and down Main Street thinking about, is there anybody else that's been on Main Street as long as I have? And I really don't think there is anybody. After Neil Walker passed away, I think he was there a few years longer than me. So I truly have a good sense of Main Street. I was really happy to be involved with the DRI. And again, I love living and working in this village, and the work that Open Door does is indeed so important. Open Door was a small not-for-profit for many years, and we've gotten much bigger thanks to lots of support from the federal government. A number of years ago, we decided to do a master plan. We have a number of owned facilities across Westchester County, Austining certainly being our flagship and our most important facility. And so we engaged Canon Design, who you'll hear from in a bit, to help us assess our facilities and make plans for the future. We hired Michelle Noe, who's our capital projects director, and she took responsibility for getting the master plan. We realized that our 165 Main Street was really not adequate. It's currently not adequate. It's not sufficiently spacious, needed some significant improvements. And the good news was we had purchased 2 Church Street in 2019 because we literally ran out of space. We put our administrative offices in 2 Church Street. It's where I actually work. We have a nice parking lot there. And we realized ultimately that if we were going to take Open Door into the next decades, we needed to upgrade our facility, and 2 Church really provided the best configuration to do that. It's a square building, unlike 165, which is a retrofit department store. So the presentation you'll hear tonight is about how we're going to move some of our services across the street, leave other services behind. Dental will stay at 165. Medical and behavioral health will move over to Church Street, and you'll hear from Canon Design about how we would like to configure the building. I think it's really exciting. We shared it with Maddie and with Karen. I think it's really neat. I think it's gonna be wonderful for Austining. I'm right there on the aqueduct, kind of adjacent to Maple House, and it's kind of dim and not so exciting. And I envision that this is going to be a much more interesting place. And I think there'll be a lot more engagement with the community as a result of the improvements that we intend to make. So with that, I'm turning it over to,
We're going to have Rob.
Rob. Good. Thank you.
So Rob is on zooming in, and Maddie, if we could put up some of the renderings,
Sure.
really the main.
Yeah, we can do it, or he can share.
Yeah.
Would he rather share?
Oh, sure. I can share. Give me a quick second to pull those plans up, and I can certainly do that.
Just just to supplement something that Lindsay had said, so what's happening is the administrative offices are moving out of 2 Church Street to an offsite location out of the village. And so all medical will be in 2 Church and 165. So we will be devoting that all to patient care.
Thank you.
Okay, let me just pull this up. I'm going to share the plans, elevations, and 3-dimensional views that we had included in the zoning submission. So we could just walk through those documents. Let me just get these up on screen here. Okay, and toggle back to you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right, can you all see what I have on screen now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for allowing us the time this evening. And just to build on what Lindsay was describing, the goal for 2 Church Street, which really grew out of the master plan that we worked on together to expand Open Doors' presence in downtown Ossining and reposition 2 Church Street as a really a modern ambulatory clinical building to serve the needs of Open Doors' expanding patient base and serving the community effectively, and really building a campus in downtown Ossining, with 2 Church being directly across the street from 165 Main. So giving us the opportunity to develop that 2 Church Street building for clinical care, for medical and behavioral health services, as Lindsay noted, and then allowing us to continue the transformation by repositioning 165 Main Street as well. So the floor plans that we're sharing kind of show the clinical interior fit out in the building, and then highlight the new construction components that we are introducing to 2 Church Street to really create a welcoming front door to this new modernized repositioned building and clinical facility. The main entrance on Church Street will be right at the corner of Church Street and the entry to the aqueduct just below, and that will be ultimately a 2-story glass entrance that will allow for patient access to both levels of the facility, and really create that new front door that signals the presence of this building within the downtown and responds both back across the street to 165 Main, as well as creating a very appropriate and welcoming presence on the aqueduct as well. Additionally, on the upper level, and you can see the kind of the upper level footprint of the new entrance facing 2 Church Street, we're also repositioning the entrance that faces out to the existing parking lot. This will allow for patients arriving by vehicle to park and access the facility effectively, and that upper patient lobby will be accessed both from the parking lot entry as well as from the Church Street entry, coming up a ceremonial stair, as well as with a new elevator for accessible access to both levels. What we really tried to do, and I'll zoom in a bit here so we can see this elevation. We're looking now kind of down the slope of the Church Street elevation, and the new entrance, which really sits within the existing pocket that's created by the corner of the building as it exists today. So we're creating that 2-story glass entry lobby, that really opening up to the community, opening up to the aqueduct, and then creating a landscaped element to manage the site slope, and also create an amenity space for both patients of Open Door as well as the public enjoying the aqueduct with a stair and fixed seating and planted elements that are incorporated into the design of that exterior hardscape component. It actually reduces the footprint of the existing built construction that faces the aqueduct, and creates that kind of open, welcoming presence that we spoke of with the new entrance, and introducing that public amenity with the fixed seating along the stair. This is looking from the aqueduct view, so you can see what that stair element and some of the seating components that we've introduced interspersed within the stair, and the glass enclosure of that two-story lobby, accessing both clinical services on the first floor as well as up to the second level. This is looking at the parking lot elevation, and we're essentially repositioning and reimagining the existing bank entrance to create that upper level entry from the parking lot for the open door facility, which will now capture the entire footprint of the two-story building. I'll back off from this image just a little bit. So this is a three-dimensional rendering of what that corner at Church Street and the aqueduct would look like. You can see some of those seating elements that are incorporated into the stair that is that's managing that site slope away, and with a new front entry that will be located at the corner of the new two-story lobby, with a new accessible entry coming right in off of the sidewalk, and then of course the stair component itself also providing access up to the front door of Open Door. So we'll be able to engage with the existing landscape along the aqueduct, receiving that with kind of this landscape wall that that terminates the stair, and then wrapping around to the front of the building, and really allowing that new entrance to be kind of a lantern or a beacon of the community facility, looking out to Church Street and to the aqueduct itself. This is a small rendering of what that parking lot elevation will look like as well. Really looking to maintain a drive-through component, so we have drop-off services for patients arriving with a family member or via rideshare, and having that covered access directly into the facility. So I'll back up here to the rendered view of the new entrance, and ultimately, I think Chuck, if you're going to take things forward with the site plan, we can transition over.
Thanks, Rob. Good evening. My name is Chuck Hudson. I'm a senior associate with the firm of Langen Engineering, and we're responsible for the site civil engineering in support of this, as Jerry said, kind of modest but very impressive expansion to this facility. The site improvements are really kind of in line with this kind of modest expansion. The total square footage that we're increasing the facility by is a little over 2,000 square feet. The total disturbance area is about 6,500 square feet.
I'm sorry, I just gonna stop you for 1 second. So we would get the site plan up.
Yep.
Perfect.
That's why Mike's on there.
Yeah. I texted when I thought there may be an issue.
Thank you.
And I'm going to ask Mike to zoom into what we're calling the back, which is the entrance off of Church. So really most of the site work that's being proposed is in the area of what we're calling the back, or the entrance off of Church. There's an existing bank drive-through, which we're going to take advantage of. And as Rob said, we're creating a very kind of pleasing entrance that's covered for patient drop-off. We're also working the parking spaces that face the building. We're taking an opportunity to catch a couple extra spaces, but also to make the ADA spaces in that area compliant. So that's really all we're doing to the existing parking lot. We are switching the traffic flow. So currently, The traffic comes in the upper driveway and circles around and exits the lower driveway closer to the building. From a patient drop-off perspective, it makes more sense to come in that lower driveway, let the patients go to the covered area to drop off, and then circulate around and out. There's no issues with sight distance. We're not narrowing the drive aisle. It's truly just reversing the flow of traffic, and we'll do that with some signage that tells people do not enter one and one way or the other. If Mike, you want to go to the bottom side, what I call the front entrance, or what we're calling the front entrance. You want to zoom into the corner there. So Rob described this area where the building expansion is, this two-story entrance, and with the modification to how you transition from Church Street and the old aqueduct into the building. And we're taking out kind of an older feeling, very dark area, and we're replacing it with this very open building expansion and these very gracious stairs that incorporate seating areas. So it's really an opportunity to kind of open up this corner. And we'll show the Google view, street view of that, and you can kind of see what it looks like now and what we're trying to do. So that's that corner now. And basically what we're proposing is to square off the corner of the building and then kind of recreate this kind of very grand set of staircases and provide a much easier access into what we're going to identify as the front of this building. That's really all of the site improvements that we're proposing. It's not very complicated. I think as Jerry mentioned, there are a few pre-existing conditions that require us to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for variances. And we also are asking this board for a waiver from the parking requirements. Based on the additional square footage in your code, we're required to provide 86 parking spaces. We currently can provide 80. So we're asking this board to consider a parking waiver for that variation of 6 spaces. I think one of the things about this facility that probably is worth mentioning and taking into consideration is you decide whether that's a waiver that you're comfortable with. There is some parking on Church Street, so there is parking there. And there, people come to this using public transportation. So we think the combination of those things and the fact that this facility has really operated pretty efficiently with the parking that they currently had, I think we're comfortable that this is going to operate properly with 6 fewer spaces than your code requires. There are also some variations in the parking space sizes. I say variations. It was constructed with spaces that are less than what your code requires, which are 9 by 18. And in fact, your code only includes one dimension for a drive aisle to a parking lot. It's 24 feet. And typically when we design parking lots with 90-degree parking on both sides and two-way traffic, you would use a 24-foot aisle. This is a one-way aisle, so the width of it can be reduced. It currently exists around 21 feet, and we believe that's adequate for the type of circulation and the amount of traffic that we're proposing. So those are variances that we have to go to the to the Zoning Board of Appeals and ask for. See, there's probably 1 or 2 more. There are. The other is the loading space requirement. This facility was originally or has been an office, which wouldn't necessarily require a loading space. Our proposed use will not require a loading space. All of the supplies that will come into the other facility where they have a loading dock and an area to store the material. So this facility, it's not anticipated to create a demand for trucks and deliveries of any great extent. And therefore, we don't think a loading dock would necessarily be required. So we're going to ask for that, either interpretation from the building inspector or a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals, depending on the interpretation that we get. And then lastly, your code includes a restriction for working within 25 feet of the old Croton Aqueduct. And obviously, the things that we're proposing will be within that 25 feet. The building currently exists within that 25 feet. The Improvements around the building in this corner by the aqueduct and Church Street are within 25 feet. And in fact, the existing improvements extend out into the aqueduct. So the point is, yes, we are within 25 feet. At some point, this facility got built probably prior to that requirement. I'm not sure. But clearly what we're doing is keeping it within the intent. We're trying to create this interaction between the street, the aqueduct, and this building, and open up this corner and do it in a way that we think is going to be meaningful when people walk up and down Main Street and downtown. And I think that covers the items that I wanted to talk about. I'll be glad to answer any questions there might be.
Can I just add a couple of things? Just, and Mike, if you could zoom in on the existing conditions plan in that corner near Church Street and the aqueduct. I just want to make sure that, I'm sure everybody thinks, is familiar with the building. I just want you to see that there are retaining walls, planted areas, etc., that are within the aqueduct. And I actually have the signed site plans that were approved in 1977 by the planning board. And these improvements are in that vicinity, and they included a berm. I have no idea under what authority, because the plans just cross-referenced by others. So I don't know who, what the arrangements were, or how that actually took place. And we haven't been able to figure that out. And we recognize that we need to deal with the old Croton Aqueduct. I mean, I should have said that first. But I want you to appreciate that the stairs that we're proposing, while they may seem like it's, more of a physical intrusion into the aqueduct, in fact, they do not extend as far or beyond what the existing intrusion is into the aqueduct. So, we really are hoping that the old aqueduct, Old Croton Aqueduct, the state, division of Parks and Rec will agree with us that it's a positive improvement in that area and allow us to do that. But we recognize that we need to talk to them. But we're substituting that kind of those improvements to clean up and make it more aesthetically pleasing and more functional, I think, for the community. There is another variance that we require, and it is the proximity of the parking to the property line. Now, we're not changing that condition, but we do need to, we've been asked to get a variance to, in effect, confirm or legalize that condition. Again, it's no different from what was shown on the 1977 site plan, but because we are doing these other improvements, I think the building inspector felt more comfortable and asked us if we would go to the zoning board of appeals and request that variance as well. And on the loading, whether or not a loading dock is required, I don't know if there's been any further indication from the building inspector on his interpretation of that, but it's interesting. The code talks about or calls for a loading dock for professional and other types of offices that are within this district that are 8,000 square feet or larger. And, we're a medical office, and it's unclear to me whether we fall within the ambit of professional office or not, because if you look at the use table, it doesn't refer to professional office in any location. It only talks about medical offices, live work offices, or general offices. So I don't know where the building inspector is going to come out on that.
I think his interpretation is that you do need to have one off-street loading.
Okay.
But I think there was a question as to whether, I spoke to Mike Tucker as to whether the, what you're proposing for loading would be considered part of that, meeting that loading requirement. And I think that's what he needs to talk to Joe about.
Okay, good. I mean, we do have a place where we could do loading, but it won't be its own dedicated space. There will be some interaction between that and some conflict between where a truck would park and unload to bring things into the building and some of the parking spaces. But we will talk to the building inspector further about that. And if we need to, if you are going to refer us, I'd ask that you include the need for the loading dock. And then if it comes to pass that we don't need that, then it won't hold us up. So.
And while you're there, I want to just go back to the aqueduct question. Have you had any conversations with the Parks Department or the state? I don't know who administers it exactly regarding that space yet.
Not yet. So that's one that we will be, they have been notified of the application. So they did receive they were sent notice of the application, but we have not had any distinct conversations with them about the site plan. So we need to initiate that.
and get moving with that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, obviously, that's an important component of all of this. I think as we open this up, kind of to board questions and board conversations, I just want to kind of outline a couple of key points. I think that it's in some of the memos online, but we are looking at a type 2 as far as secret. I think that was kind of clarified as an existing building. So we're not, so we don't have a secret determination that we need to make here. We do have a lot of comments, I know from the Keller Sessions memo, some of that was touched on, but maybe before we kind of get into this conversation, I don't know if you wanted to kind of give us kind of like a high level of some of the bigger things that we should be talking about when we go through the site plan.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry touched on,
Yeah.
our biggest point is, the agreements and then what's gonna be allowed to be constructed within the Aqueduct property. The other thing that comes up is construction access. How are we gonna perform this construction within there? Where are we gonna stage? The other thing is the back walkway. How are you gonna get to that to construct it? You need to kind of know how we're gonna get to that. And what agreements will have to be in place to construct that. The other big thing I just want to mention is you were talking about disturbance lines, and we'll have to know the disturbance amount. And you said that it might be around 6,000 square feet, so it'll probably trigger a slip. I think it's over 2,500. We can look at that.
Yeah, we would expect it to be, the lower classification with SWIP, so
Yeah,
over
yeah.
2,500,
Yeah.
but less than the other two thresholds.
Yes.
So this becomes a sediment erosion control, construction access, and kind of a plan versus water quality, water volume, detention kind of a plan.
Yeah.
We have no increase in impervious areas, so we don't trip any of the other triggers that would push us towards a formal stormwater detention system for the site.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I just didn't see it on the plan.
Yeah, we'll
So, yeah,
clarify.
there's a few things. I won't go through every little comment. There is a question I do have, and it's in regards to this area right here. I didn't know you do have a curb coming across here, and that's getting carried across. So I don't know if that curve is going to block that walkway, or is it just okay? All right.
Not intended to.
Yeah, I just
There'll be
wanted
a
to.
plus access out to the parking aisle.
Yeah.
Where there'll be a drop curb and a ramp, ADA ramp.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to get a little understanding on that.
We
And
need to clean up the line work on that.
yeah, and the only other thing I'll mention that was a bit of a concern on my sidewalk as well, and it's the corner here with the parking space. I'm just worried about a drop off onto the stairs, so I don't know if maybe wrap that guide rail around that. I was concerned. And some of the guardrail that's there now is kind of broken up. You might need to replace that.
With the investment that Open Door is making, we'll make sure that the guide rail is appropriate. And we really think that your comment about wrapping it around the corner there to protect that there that goes down is a really good idea. We'll incorporate that into our next version of the plan.
Has there been any thought to the lighting of this rear area today?
So we don't want to change any of the site lighting. Any new lighting will be from the building. So the new canopy will have some lighting to it. The doorways will have some lighting to it, but we're not doing anything to the parking lot. We're gonna leave it the way it is.
Can you provide light designs on your next submissions? Because that was one of the things that we also noted as
Yep.
design.
So I mean, there's a couple of BAR questions. I think a lot of the things that we're looking at right now, in terms of the changes are on, that corner where you're going down onto the aqueduct. I think having clarity on that is important because I know that kind of impacts how you're accessing this new addition and, the whole approach to the whole site. So I think that's a really, really big thing to have an understanding and resolution to. But in the meantime, I think also kind of understanding in more of a photo type rendering to understand what this thing is going to look like, what this addition will add. And I mean, the architectural addition, but then also the site plan changes down on the aqueduct. I think that right now everything is, understandably at this point in the game, we're looking at line drawings and kind of rendered elevations, but it would definitely be helpful for us as we're kind of considering and understanding what the impact will be on the aqueduct, kind of how this thing will look. And I want to just kind of emphasize also the Keller Sessions point about site access and construction, because that you're doing a lot of work down on these kind of deeper portions of the aqueduct trail where it's kind of difficult to access. We want to obviously maintain, that's a major kind of right of way through the village that folks use, and it can't be closed down. So how that's going to be coordinated and work is something that I just think about as I'm looking at all of this. I'd like to open this up to the board for kind of initial questions and comments at this point.
I have a couple of quick questions. They're really less VAR and site plan questions. Am I correct that there are no other uses in the building now? The bank is not there, the elected official offices are no longer
They're
there.
still there, he's leaving.
Oh,
I feel bad, but.
okay. So, but you will have the entire building.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm sort of curious about the parking, knowing that parking is in demand in downtown Ossining, and what your expectation is in terms of your patient visits on a daily basis, how many people you actually expect, especially I think this would be important for the parking waiver. How many people throughout the course of the day do you expect the parking lot to ever be full? If not, how will you be able to prevent people who are not using your services from using the parking there?
I think the best response is, right now, we don't have one parking spot. Right, so all of our patients are parking on the street, parking in the back, if you can even get a spot in the back. The lot that supports Two Church is our administrative offices right now, and all of our administration is moving.
Mhm.
We will all be leaving. So the 80 spaces will be available to patients who currently now don't even have one space.
Would any spots be designated for staff or faculty? It would all be open spots.
Nobody has designated anything right now.
Not even you, Lindsay?
Not even me. Not even Sandy Galen. She never had one spot. So it's parking in Ossining is dreadful. I've been there for 40 years. I understand.
Other kind of board questions that it's kind of a good opportunity to get initial thoughts out there if you have. Okay, Valerie,
I have
yeah.
a couple comments,
Yeah.
if that's all right.
please, no, that was my next turn.
So just in terms of, this is with the applicant, so this project requires notification to Westchester County Planning Department. Do you want me to submit that notification? It's not it's a referral. We'll go ahead and move forward with that.
Unless you have a preference for us to do it. It doesn't.
No, that I was planning, because you mentioned that you were gonna do or mention something about the referral, so just wanna make sure we have it clear who's doing that.
Yeah, no, if you would do it, I was
Okay.
kind of on my checklist of things to make sure we talk about this
Right.
evening, if you're willing to do it. If you need additional materials or anything, let us know.
No, it's just a notification form, so it'll be simple. And then just a couple of things in terms of your next submission. So the materials list is definitely needed for the VAR review, as well as the south elevation. And then in terms of just for this board, this is in the LWRP coastal consistency area, but it doesn't require EAC referral because it's a type 2 action. And then the last thing, just a couple of things in terms of internal circulation. The one concern that we had is that we understand that it's, the two entrance access points are existing, but I just want to make sure that the applicant takes a look at the site distances, because there are some on-street parking, and just want to make sure that none of that needs to be adjusted because the change in the internal circulation.
Mhm.
And then the last is just, I think we brought this up about the access and also easements, but if you could have also add those easements onto the site plan, especially dealing with anything that's associated with the aqueduct. Would be helpful as well.
You're talking about easements, from the aqueduct space.
Yeah. I would assume that there might be some from like the 1977 plan, but I don't know. So if there are, right. Exactly. I'll leave that up to
No,
you, Jerry.
it's public
Right.
property,
actually
it's state
public
property. Yeah.
Right,
There's a-
but they
So
have,
you-
but they already are encroaching onto their property. I
Right,
don't
so there
know if
might be
there's
some
any- right.
agreement. I think that's what Jerry said, that she couldn't find
Right.
anything. And she and I did speak today about reaching out to them. That at a minimum, they would need some kind of permission to go on the property to do this work and to maintain it there. And who maintains it? Does Open Door maintain it? Does the state maintain it? There should be some agreement between Open Door and state parks on that issue.
Wouldn't necessarily be an easement because it's public property. But there should be an agreement.
Yeah, that's helpful. Sorry, did you have a response or?
No, I'm just acknowledging that we will do that.
Okay. Okay, so I think, this project was noticed. I think it would be good just at this point to check in with the public to see if there's anybody here from the public to speak to this. Could we maybe have a motion from the board to open the public hearing on this matter?
Michael Aronson, motion to open a public hearing on the item.
Isabel Wynn, I second that motion.
All right, any objections? No objection, motion passes. We're now in a public hearing. So now I know we are working kind of in a live and online scenario here. So is there anybody, I'm just gonna start in the room, who's here to speak to this application? If you are, you can raise your hand. Other than the press enters. I don't see any hands. Is there anybody, if you're online and you would like to speak to this application, you can use the hand raise function on Zoom. I know there's not too many people in the attendees space right now. And I do not see any hands. And Maddie, have we received any emails or any other documentation yet from the public? All right, very good. So at this point, we have a motion to adjourn the public hearing on something.
Isabel Wynn, motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Michael Aronson, second.
Objections? No objections. The motion passes. The public hearing is adjourned. So kind of moving forward, I think, the one thing that we can do right now is make a referral to the zoning board. It'd be helpful. Do we have and I know we've spoken of all of these, but just a summary of what those referrals are at this point.
Yeah, I think in what I have listed is, the aqueduct, as proposed variance from section 270-37A, the 25-foot strip of land immediately adjacent to and from the Elm Croton aqueduct is considered a buffer. Then also variance from appendix C of the zoning chapter. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the parking waiver, excuse me. Section 270-30A4, for each parking space shall be a minimum of 9 feet wide by 18 feet deep. The other variances for section 270-30A4, dealing with the minimum parking aisle width shall be 24 feet for spaces at 90-degree angles for, I think it's parking lots greater than 20 spaces. And then as section 270-30, all driveways, blacktops, or loading docks must be at least 2 feet away from the property line in non-residential districts. And then the last is potentially for 270-30B for the off-street loading requirement.
All right, and I know the applicant did make a request to include that on a referral. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's five of them. So get a motion then from the board to make this referral to the zoning board.
Michael Aronson, motion to refer to the ZBA with the 5 items as outlined by Valerie.
Second the motion.
All right. I guess we'll do a roll call here.
Oh.
Take your pick.
You do it.
Ulysses Castillo,
Yes.
Isabel Wynn,
Aye.
Barbara Bernbeck, Brenda Bernbeck. And your main thing is turned on. Carla Elia.
Right.
Michael Aronson.
Aye.
Seth Roy.
Aye. All right, motion carries 6-0. So right, the referral is passed. So I guess at this point, does the applicant have any other questions for the board at this point?
No, I just didn't, if you had any more information that you wanted with respect to our parking waiver or any, I understand materials and things of that nature for the ARB review, the BAR review.
I think it was the patient count that you anticipate is the patient count for the parking waiver.
Right.
Okay.
I think it's also important to see the ZBA, the ZBA's response to the parking space sizes, because those are all really important as well. All right, very good. So can we accept a motion from the board to adjourn this item?
Isabel Wynn, motion to adjourn this Is that it?
Carmen, do you have something?
Any objections? Objections, matter is adjourned. All right, so thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Very good. All right. We're gonna move forward. You're relieved, right? We're VAR.
Yeah. So in the future.
Very good. No, okay. So we're gonna move forward. If you guys want to have conversations, I'm sorry, it's mine. Yeah. We're gonna keep going here. So we're gonna move on to item B on our agenda, which is a VAR 13-2022. This is 10 Jenkins Court. And so I don't know if we have the applicant in the room or if we have the applicant online. We have them online. So who's speaking here? This is
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Bevavino from the architecture firm Architecture. I'm representing Joe and Tara Pastanetti, the homeowners of 10 Jenkins Court.
okay. So, and I think you should have screen shareability. So if you can put your presentation up on the screen, you can walk us through, the project.
Hey, Mike, I'm here.
Hi, Joe. So this, what you guys are looking at right now is the existing front elevation of their home. They have an existing entry staircase that was made up of railroad ties, similar to many of the homes on Jenkins Court that were all built around the same time. That stair, those railroad ties have kind of deteriorated and have become kind of a safety as well as like an eyesore issue. We went to the ZBA in order to get approvals because the stair is within the front yard setback, and that board voted unanimously to approve the stair. We're basically looking to put a new stair back in the exact same location. I've also included some photos of the neighboring homes that have done sort of similar alterations, renovations to the front of their home. This is one Jenkins. They replaced their stair with sort of a stone and bluestone paver with new railings and a new awning. 2 Jenkins has a similar new portico covering over the front door. 3 Jenkins is a little bit different. 4 Jenkins, again, sort of similar canopy over the front door. Another renovation at 6 Jenkins. Pretty much all the homes, or a good majority of them, have sort of renovated these existing railroad ties. So if I go to picture of what we're looking to do. So the existing home has that wood staircase that wraps its way up to the front door. We're looking to create a new staircase along with a new sort of portico entry with columns. Just to run through the materials real quick. The proposed stone cladding that runs along the entire stair and along the lower level of the home is a kind of Carrera ledge stone. Looking to use bluestone on the treads and landings. For the railings and posts, white PVC material that'll be durable, and black metal spindles that we think will look nice with the sort of in character with the neighborhood and the home. And then for the portico entry, we're just looking to match the existing siding, the colors of the trim, the same asphalt shingles, to kind of have it fall in sort of the same spirit of the dormers, use the same pitch and everything. The only other thing that's worth mentioning is that we also added just some storage for trash bins underneath the planter alongside the stair. That way we can kind of get them out of the driveway. And I'd open it up to any questions that the board has.
All right, yeah, no, I mean, I find this to be, straightforward, very clearly presented. I just would ask if there's anyone on the board who wants to speak or ask any questions. Yeah, I think you covered all your bases. I mean, it was very clear. No, I mean, I think, look, it's, you showed the before photos in the presentation. I think it's a lovely improvement. If there are no questions from the board, Valerie, is there anything that you pointed out that, and I know you had a memo that you wanted, that we should be just bringing up here?
Oh, no, I didn't I didn't have a memo for this
Okay.
particular project.
Okay. And then can we have a motion to open up the public hearing?
Is Bowen motion to open up the public hearing?
And
Gonna do a second motion.
objections? No objections? Is there anybody here from the public in this room or online? So in this room, don't see any hands. Online, you can use the hand raise function on Zoom if you would like to speak to this application. And I do not see any hands up. And I'm assuming no emails or call, or very good to the village. So can we have a motion to close the public hearing on this application?
Michael Aronson, motion to close the public hearing.
Great. It's like Jeopardy. And any objections? No objections. Motion carries. The public hearing is closed. I'm just, I'm just looking to see if there's any conditions or anything that we really need to clarify, but I do think that this presentation is pretty complete. The material list is complete, looks accurate. So I mean, I think this is straightforward, other than the standard, conditions that would be written into such a resolution. So with that, we have a motion to approve the application.
Michael Aronson, motion to approve the application.
Brenda Rovak, second motion.
Got it. And we'll do a roll call here.
Ulysses Castillo.
Aye.
Isabel Wynn.
Aye.
Brenda Burback.
Aye.
Carla Elia.
Aye.
Michael Aronson.
Aye.
Seth Roy.
Aye, and the motion carries 6-0. So very good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Very good. Okay. So we are gonna keep moving down.
Thank
the
you.
list.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. We have another BAR. Our next one is 44 Iroquois Road, BAR 16-2022. So is this applicant also online? You know who the applicant is? Great. Very good. All right, so you guys are now in the meeting. If you guys, can you just introduce yourselves and then you can start your presentation.
Yes, hi, good evening. This is Max Parangi from Max Parangi Architects. We are the architect of record, and I have the homeowner, Mr. Avi Verma, here with us. We are proposing a rear dormer addition to an existing residence. We did go in front of the ZBA, and we got an approval for a minor area variance, which was granted to us on January 5th, 2023. So basically last month. And then we are now in front of the BAR, to discuss a little bit the aesthetics of this dormer addition. Is not in the front of the house. The dormer addition is in the back of the house. We are proposing a total addition to the second floor of 209 square feet, 209.5. That's the total area of our addition. And we would like to share with you, the floor plans quickly. Basically, we are keeping the ridge at the same height and extending the dormer with like full height walls in the back. And we are adding 2 bedrooms. Right now is the typical Cape Cod configuration. There are two very tiny rooms, so we basically added, a master bedroom and it's not really a master bathroom because the bathroom is in common between the two rooms. And there is a little study computer area at the top of the stairs. With that said, I would, if you don't mind, move on to the exterior elevations. In terms of material, we are matching the existing GAF timber line of the roofs. The color is an oyster gray. We have a table prepared for you that you can see. So basically we are matching the existing shingle over there. The siding also the manufacturer is Royal and is a warm sandalwood and it's just vinyl siding to match the existing siding of the house. The trim is just number 2 pine with a white Benjamin Moore paint. And the windows are Anderson and is the typical standard Anderson white color of the. Maybe I can show you a little bit of the existing conditions of the house. This is the subject house in the front, and and this is the way it is currently in the back, and this is what we are proposing, basically. We do have a little glitch, which I would like to introduce to the BAR members and the chairperson at this point. As we were preparing these plans, the homeowner asked us, Mr. Verma, if we could add a picture window in the back. So this is not on the color rendering. Maybe you can show the proposed. And we bubbled up that window for you. So right now it would be, two symmetrical double hung windows. And then we in this version, we just added a picture window. Just to throw some more light on the inside of if that is acceptable to the board. And also the same thing on the side, there is an extra window for cross ventilation. Typically, what we ended up doing is to have one narrow and longer window on the side of the bed. So there is one of them existing, and we just added a second one. If the board is open to that, we are asking respectfully for consideration. I understand that this is not being provided on the original thing. That's the only glitch that I just wanted to share with the board.
So was that drawing ever shared with the village before tonight?
No, not really. No, this is sort of it's an afterthought.
So I mean, right now we can really only look at what's been noticed and shown. So really the only materials that we can consider or look at or vote on are what you presented and was listed on the agenda. So we can't.
Right. Understood. Understood. Understood.
Is there
fine with that.
anything else materially or related to these elevations that you want to show us? I think you've kind of gone through this. I actually want to ask a couple of questions, while you're there. I think the first one just relates to the visibility of the back of the house and what vantage points you'll be able to look upon this elevation. And I don't know if there's you do have a location map. I don't know if there's an aerial photo or something that we can look at just to really.
Google it. One second. We can just show you a Google aerial view.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Yeah, the view in the back is pretty limited. I mean, it's not like really. It's not really that visible from the street. All of this happens in the rear of the property, and only affected elevation would be the rear of the property. And the house is set pretty much back from the street too. What, this is sort of like, what if these are garages? behind?
Yeah, that's a condominium in the back.
In the, yeah, in the back, there are some condominiums and what I was questioning now are some garages for this condominium right there. That's what they would be looking at, basically.
Okay,
No.
It's a little hard to hear you guys. I don't know if anybody else here is having that problem.
No, let me maybe come closer to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. The reason I'm asking is I just had some, I mean, even before you showed those other window questions, is I'll let the board kind of talk and think about it, is just the way that those windows, were placed, didn't seem to match with anything down below, and the scale of the windows seemed to be much larger than the other windows on the house. It's a thought that I had as I'm looking at these, which is why visibility is important to me. But that was really the only kind of feedback or kind of reaction that I had to the drawing. I would certainly open it up to the board.
Yeah, I mean, that was my concern, is what's in the rear of the property, who's looking out on this, and what would they see when they looked out on it?
In reality, the exposure at the back of the property is very limited. As I was pointing out, in the back of the property, there is a condominium which is set pretty much back, and then right immediately at the property line, there is a number of garages. Cargo, you can go to the thing one more time. So if you can follow our cursor, basically, if there is trees, of course, blocking the view, and also garages. These are garages of this condominium. It's not and the condominium itself is set quite back and sheltered, I would say, by the trees.
Okay, and just in terms of what the neighbors on Iroquois Road across the street, could you refresh our memory and show us what they would be seeing from the front of the house and from adjacent properties?
Absolutely, we can show you the photographs of the neighboring. We prepared a little location map showing, the houses on the right side. On our right side is also a cape with a couple of dormers. More or less, they all have the same feel. The one across the street from us is slightly bigger, is a one-car garage. And the one across the street, but immediately in front of us, it's number 37, which is basically, I would categorize it as a one-story ranch.
And Michael, your question was more related to any visible changes from the street facing facade. I don't believe there are, correct?
Absolutely not. No, none of the front is. As I was stating before, we kept the same ridge line. So even from the side is, probably very limited change in what you will see, at least from the street, because the house itself is set back. Let's not forget we are set back pretty. Let's go to the Google thing one more time. And there is quite a distance from the Iroquois Road from the street. I mean, we are lined up with the other homes, but we are not immediately on top of the street. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a fairly decent setback. I doubted that any of this would be visible from the street. Or very limited, in a very limited manner.
In terms of seeing the roof line on the side of the house, I think that might be slightly visible as you're driving along Iroquois.
Yeah, the roof lines are going to change, of course, but I don't think it's going to be any drastic change in terms of the perception from the street, the view from the street.
Yeah, I mean, so my one concern was more the windows and the roof line. I don't know. I mean, if that's something that really nobody else can see, I'm not, it's gonna make or break me. It looked like they were designed from, to match to work with what was going on inside the bedroom, but not really it almost looks like the outside wasn't really thought about. So that's my opinion. I don't, I'm not gonna let that drive what the board, sorry. Just keep on
I
moving,
think the windows on the bottom are what look bad. The
but,
windows on the top look good. So,
If you look at the front elevation also, you will see that there is a theme with the double hung and the shutters, of course, which we don't have in the back. But especially on the left side of the front elevation, if you see, and also on the left elevation, there is a theme across the house of these double hung windows. Let's call it. So we try to replicate that in a certain way. Don't forget that in this version we do need egress windows. So the size of the windows has to follow the code too, because they're bedrooms.
are you saying that the downstairs windows are not egress size? Because that honestly, the double hung is not the issue. For me, I'm just looking at these, and maybe it's just something about the drawing, but yeah, they look like they're way larger. Are you saying the downstairs windows there are no egress windows, size windows downstairs?
In the back, you have a kitchen downstairs and a bathroom, so it is really, it is what it is. We did not touch the first floor at all. The first floor of the house is absolutely not being affected by this. There's no changes to the first floor.
And I understand that. My point simply is I don't want neighbors to be looking upon this and wondering why there's this kind of difference in the top in the addition and in the existing work. That it is pretty.
If you look at if you look at the color rendering, because in this one we have to put the dash and we have a different graphic showing, the new versus the existing, but in reality, once you have a uniform siding, I mean, there is no, it's a little deceiving in the regular non-colored version.
I understand. Look, I understand, and it's not a matter of the windows being the wrong type or the wrong color or the wrong. It's kind of the size, and also like if you look at the master bedroom window over that double door, it's kind of just shifted over instead of being centered over it, which might organize things and make it look a little bit more nicely. That's kind of.
Let me see the floor.
That's kind of how I feel about this. Like, it looks off. Like if this was in my backyard, I would have a hard time with it.
There's the same amount of room on either side. Like the windows aren't centered on the house. If you look at that drawing, you have a different width on each side of the house.
Yes. But I mean, our criteria, at least in the master bedroom, was to center it in the room. But if the board, finds this offensive from the outside, we can just move the double windows slightly to the right to have the same amount of space in the bedroom number one on the left side of bedroom. The same amount of wall space on both sides in both rooms. In other words, shifting the two Anderson windows in the master bedroom, that one, slightly to the left, which will almost align with the sliding doors, and then it will almost be symmetrical to the right side windows. Right now, what we have is we centered it in the room, and there is a slight discrepancy. We also centered it with go back to the elevation, and we also centered it with the edge of the sliding door. So there is some kind of a rhyme and reason to it, but of course it's not symmetrical. I understand. We tried to make it symmetrical from the inside, but we could shift it to the left if that is a big concern of the board. We have no objections to that, to make both sides symmetrical and the same amount of wall on this side that you'll find on that side. That would, I think, at least make me align it a little bit more, maybe. In the floor plan, I don't think there is anything against doing this change.
Sorry, Brenda, you had a comment?
Yeah, so if you make the outside window symmetrical, then the middle window is no longer symmetrical. So,
It's not. Right now, the window in the middle is symmetrical to the double hungs of the bedrooms. So, you know, in our view, at least, we try to create a symmetry here, you know, and this is symmetrical with the window below. It's sort of difficult to marry the first floor, which is remaining untouched with a new second floor. So of course, there is many different permutations. I mean,
I'm
this is.
gonna cut you off just for a second. So I mean, look, we're looking here to see if this is offensive or it's gonna kind of negatively impact building neighbors. I don't wanna stay in this for too long. I think if there's an easy way to move this, or, you know, it's a little jarring, but it may also be the quality of the drawing. You know, if we feel as a board that, well, it's not maybe perfect or what we would have designed, if we feel it kind of meets the criteria and is not overly offensive, I think we can still allow it. It would be helpful just to hear, you know, something from everybody on this one. I know we've, you know, heard from some of us. I don't know, Ulysses, do you have any, sorry to call you out just because I know you're not an architect on the board.
Well, it's hard to see what is what's driving the location, but I also of the windows, I agree with that. But I also think that I agree with other comments. The first floor is not doing you any favors. So it's a tough one.
Yeah.
You know, you have constraints. I understand there's constraints of following with the interior, and but you know, that's the first floor is kind of all over the place. So it's, you know, if you're trying to do something symmetrical and orderly in the second, you're going to have a hard time.
Yeah.
As best we could. Of course, there is different permutations, and I agree with you. This is not perfect. But, you know, I would like please to reiterate with the board that, you know, keep in mind, this is totally in the back of the house.
Yeah, and I get it, and that's a fair point. And Ulysses, I appreciate you articulating that. I think at this point, we can just move forward and at least towards the public portion of this is so just for the sake of the rhythm of the meeting, we can have a motion to open the public hearing here.
Please vote in. Motion to open the public hearing. Second motion.
All right, any objections? No objections. We're now in a public hearing. Is there anybody here from the public to speak to the application? I see no hands in the room. Is there anybody on Zoom? You can use the hand raise function. I only see two attendees in the room. Is there anybody who would like to speak? I do not see any hands raised. Kathy, no letters or emails have been received by the village. Okay, so I guess kind of thinking about this, if there's a comfort level with this kind of being kind of, it is kind of what it is. It's not offensive. It's not perfect. I think we, you know, is every, you know, look, I mean, because I don't want to close the public hearing if we're gonna make them go back, but I'm kind of getting, I appreciate the feedback, kind of both your comment, Brenda, and your comment, Ulysses. Is there's no way to work that in between, and you know, it's not offensive. It's just not perfect. So I'm seeing heads shake. Yeah. Do we think we can? Do we have a motion from the board to close the public hearing on this?
Michael Aaron, the motion to close the public hearing.
Brenda Roback, second.
I'm actually going to do a roll call on this one just to make sure we're all on the same page.
One
Yeah.
thing I just want to point out, he did show those two other windows.
Yeah.
So if the applicant is interested in including those other windows, you might want to keep the public hearing open and then having them resubmit for next month.
Right,
So I don't know.
if you want to proceed with that,
Right,
so there's two ways to do it. You can either say we're proceeding with it as is, if they
Okay.
want to get that approved so they can get started,
So let me yeah. So let me put that question to the
or
applicant.
do they
So,
want to resubmit?
so per our comment before, what we were talking about was, you know, what I mentioned. We cannot vote on any revisions that you're considering with your client right now. What's before us is the rendering that you have on the screen. If we're prepared to go forward, we can do that. If you feel like you would like to come back with the revisions, we can keep the hearing open and we can look at this again at our meeting in February. Do you have a preference?
I will delegate the answer to that question to the homeowner who is here present with us. But a question for the board at this time. So I know there's been a little bit of debate about the size of the windows, and so go back to the other version, please. So if we go back to this version, which has even bigger windows, one bigger window to be precise. Do you think the board would be amenable to CS or
Yeah.
favorable to this solution? Because we are already debating the rear windows being too big.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure if I expressed this correctly, but did the thought come across or?
I understand that. And this is, I'll just say that, so we'll answer the question. This is, we're kind of looking at this hypothetically because we haven't really
Yeah.
seen this.
Yeah, I mean, we're not supposed to kind of argue the merits of this yet, right? But I could
Right.
say I was kind of more, for me, more concerned about actually the window on the side. Even though I
Agreed.
actually, it's probably, you can argue it's less visible from some vantage points, but just the location so close to the edge. I was just, I guess I would question if you could put that somewhere in another location and still get that cross circulation that you're looking for. Just kind of think more about it.
Yeah, it's just a couple of rooms, so I don't really, typically when we do this, we like to frame the bed we leave the bed in behind it in the middle and the side tables right under the window. So that was the general thought. I will delegate the answer to the question to the homeowner who's hereby present with us. My personal professional opinion, if I may, and I think this might be difficult to envision for a homeowner, but if you look at the rear elevation with that picture window, and I know, and I'm saying this candidly in front of the homeowner. In my opinion, I personally, as a professional, I like the symmetry of the doubles without the picture window. But it's not my place and it's not my house, so.
Yeah.
You know.
So at this point, I would like for your client to let us know, right now, very straightforward, if you would like to move forward with
Exactly.
vision.
No, I would, thank you. Yeah, we'll just go ahead with the double.
With the
Yeah,
double,
yeah.
yeah, I think we are okay with the original version.
Okay.
Then you can go ahead with the. motion.
Then, all right, thank you. That's helpful. So can we, I think we had a motion to close the public hearing and I had asked for a roll call. So let's do a roll call on,
Just to close the
just to
public hearing.
close the public hearing.
Ulysses Castillo,
I
Isabel Wynn,
Aye.
Brenda Burback.
Aye.
Carla Elia.
Aye.
Michael Aronson. Aye. Seth Roy.
Aye, okay, so the public hearing is closed. And at this point, we've discussed it. I think we know where this stands. Can we have an motion to approve the application as submitted? And I guess before, are there any other conditions? Again, I think that the material list here is actually pretty comprehensive. I don't see any special conditions other than the standards, unless anything from the board has anything to add. So then with that, can we have a motion to approve the application as submitted?
Isabel Wynn, motion to approve the application as submitted. Carly, do you accept the motion?
And another roll call.
Ulysses Castillo,
Aye.
Isabel Wynn,
Aye.
Brenda Burback.
Aye.
Carla Elia,
Aye.
Michael Aronson.
Aye.
Seth Roy.
Aye, all right, very good. So the motion carries 5-0, 6-0, sorry. All right, so thank you guys very much for your time tonight, and you guys can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and all board members.
All right, very good. So we're now moving on to our next DAR application. This is going to be 4th Avenue. I think we have to okay, so Fourth Avenue. So DAR 19-2022.
No.
Okay. So yeah, hi, so please introduce yourself and you can.
So, and I'm realizing that it's almost easier to unfurl a presentation remotely than what I might want to do. But anyhow.
And actually, I just want to be clear, just as a matter of process, I think we need to have the application, any materials that are presented on the screen is that I would prefer to have anything, so anybody who's watching from the Zoom from the public would be able to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not,
Do we-
with
do you
the
have to go?
ZBA, it
We
was
can do it.
queued up,
So
so
we can do
we
it.
should
Yeah.
be able to.
Yeah, we have
I'm not
all of these
presenting
items on the
any
agenda, so
We
it
can
should all be there.
So
Fort
hi,
Terrace.
I'm Julie Evans. I'm the architect for
Plans?
Fort Terrace Avenue. My client, Margaret Ellsberg, is interested in adding a first floor bedroom to her home. And the house is well loved by my client, and I would say it's a gift to the street. It's a lovely turn of the century row house that still has its original wood siding, wood detailing. You know, it's a really sweet home, but she and her husband need this first floor bedroom. You know, health situation has changed, and for a while, we're gonna have that need. Luckily, for them, there was already a first floor 3-fixture bath. So to pop this 10-foot by 10-foot room, which is just big enough for a queen size bed, end tables, a little bit of moving around. We really don't have to do much besides create an opening, a door opening where there's an existing window facing the back. We had a zoning variance approved already for this addition. I don't have all the stats in front of me, but rear yard of about 2 feet, and then the building coverage is now going to be 36% versus 30. It was 32. So and we want to move along. I mean, this gives us context. The row houses, our house, her house is the red one with the deep gray trim. You can see the context map as well, and these are small, existing small lots in T-zone. And I think we can keep moving up. And we'll go ahead, I think almost to one more page, we can proceed past the existing plan again. And this is the proposed plan a little bit higher up, and we'll see, you know, the bedroom as furnished, just accommodates for now. And then the elevations are the last page. Okay, so single story addition, there we go. And there are 3 elevations I show. So we basically extrude the hip roof, you know, from what was a little porch bump out, keep everything below the existing bedroom that's above. And in terms of fenestration, I have egress sized casements facing the back. And then on both sides of the addition in the bedroom, we have some awnings to really help the feel of the room itself, but also create something that suggests a little bit of a garden. We would have wood siding to match the exposure of the existing, paint to match existing, roofing to match existing. This will be insulated slab on grade because we're abutting an inaccessible crawl. So there's really no need to create a new crawl space. And we're also mindful of minimizing site disturbance in construction. And that's our proposal. You'll see there's a small window between the back door and the casement window. We're resizing the window for the existing path.
Is that an existing window that's being changed?
Yes.
Because the
Small,
addition
yes.
is abutting, okay.
Yes. So.
And the material of these windows, are these vinyl, wood?
They're vinyl clad, and the existing windows have all been replaced.
Okay.
So we're keeping, you know, wood casings, all the trim will be to match, and the windows will be vinyl to match wood on the inside.
You're doing so the 12 light as opposed to the 6/1s that you have upstairs.
Well, I am in that case because, I mean, I could fake it out with the casement, but, you know, I would say that for, you know, historical homes, there's so much variety within garden rooms. Porches, so I didn't feel the need to do that.
And all your fascias and trim pieces will match the painted wood that you
Yes.
have on the existing house.
Yes.
And I think I was just looking at street view, so you would, I think that one view that you're looking at, I think it's the west elevation, you would see that, I believe, from the side street, or is it the east
No,
side?
no,
I feel like
I-
there's one side that you can kind of look through the street and see. Just in terms of-
Possibly. Trying to think if we can.
Yeah, so from if you scroll up on that, oh, you can't, no, sorry, just go back to that site, I think, is that? I don't even know the name of the street, Todd Place, I think you can look through and see some of that. From the rear yard of 19,
Here, okay.
but that would be, if we scroll down, we can look at that elevation, I think it's, I mean, it's a finished and nice elevation, I'm not saying that that's a problem. Just wanted to
Right.
point it out.
And we're also seeing across a couple layers of fences.
Okay,
Before we get to this yard.
so, I mean, look, I think it's a beautifully designed in keeping with the rest of the house. I really don't have any comments on it because very, very nice.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
Just, yeah, I agree. It seems like it fits very well. And it's kind of an outgrow of the house. So I think it's very appropriate.
Okay, can we open a public hearing? Motion,
Michael Aronson, motion to open a public hearing.
Probably be a second motion.
any objections? Objections, we're in public hearing. Is there anybody here from the public in the room or, don't see any hands? Anybody from the public on Zoom? You can use the hand raise function on Zoom. And I do not see any hands and no letters or emails. Nadia is saying came from the board, from the to the village. So, okay, very good. So can I have a motion then to close the public hearing on this application?
Isabel Wing, motion to close the public hearing. Brenda Barbara, second motion.
Any objections? No objection, motion carries, the public hearing is closed. Again, I don't see any conditions or any special items that we would need to consider on any approval on this. Unless anybody disagrees. Okay, so can we have a motion from the board to approve the application?
Probably be a motion to approve this application.
Michael Aronson, second.
And we'll do a roll call.
Ulysses Castillo,
Aye.
Isabel Wynn,
Aye.
Brenda Burback,
Aye.
Carla Leah, Michael Aronson,
Aye.
Seth Roy.
Aye. Very good. All right, so the motion carries 6-1. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So we are now up to the final item on our agenda tonight. This is a planning board 01-2023 and PAR 01-2023. The planning board item, I think that's before us, is simply a parking waiver. I think that's the only.
Yeah, just for the
Yeah.
parking waiver and just for this board, they have received HPC approval and approvals from the board of trustees.
Right, and typically in VAR issues, for those of you who are new to the board, we haven't seen a project that's required the HPC approval. We tend to be deferential because they're doing effectively a similar job that we are doing and they go first. So just with that in mind, I'll bring in Mr. Fry.
Thank you.
For that.
I'm John Fry with Nexus Creative Architecture Planning and Design. If I might make a suggestion, a procedural suggestion, because those of you who know Dan Garberwood here, who's the chair of the HPC, that we might talk about the VAR items first, if that's okay.
That's fine.
with you.
You're going to present everything and we'll kind of look at, we'll kind of close this up together. So that'd be totally fine.
Right, we won't keep Dan here for the parking discussion.
I appreciate the offer, although I can stay here and wait till the end. It's whatever the board wants to do.
Up to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, look, so if you give your presentation on the VAR, look, procedurally, I'm gonna, when we go to a public hearing, we're gonna be discussing the various items, so I don't want to totally separate it out. So you give your standard pitch and we'll try to bring it as early as possible.
Back to the future, Maddie, where I'm in a little uncomfortable position of not manning a presentation from at home at Zoom, but perfect.
Is this the one?
So if you don't mind, I'll give you a brief overview. Many of you are probably, or all of you are likely familiar with the Olive Opera House, which is at the corner of Central Avenue and Brandwood. The building was originally constructed in the late 1860s. There was a fire shortly after in the 80s. The building was reimagined as the same footprint in a facsimile volume as a totally different style. It remained a vibrant theater, multi-purpose building through right up until the 30s. A manufacturing business moved in the late 30s, had a robust manufacturing business into the early 70s. And then the building sort of toggled back and forth between many uses. And over the course, particularly from the late 30s into the 70s, had been modified significantly, both on the interior and exterior. So, but fortunately, through all of that and surviving numerous fires, miraculously, the bulk of the main volumes, interior volumes, remained intact, including the theater space and supporting spaces around the theater space. So if we just kind of scroll through what you know today in the main first floor space at the corner of Central Avenue and Brandwood, it's the Hudson Valley Books for Humanity. Even before the broader picture launched, we were here 2 years ago, year and a half ago, with their initial application, and that included a parking waiver discussion. Since then, in conjunction with the evolution of the DRI process, and it's been a very busy year for the project because fortunately we were a part of the DRI process and realized that an award, partnered with Sing Sing Prison Museum Group. So all of those dynamics came together, converged literally in the last 14 months. So the building as we're discussing it today includes the bookstore use, the Sing Sing Visitor Center, as we're going to describe it, on the Central Avenue entrance, the reimagined lobby space on the lower part of Brandwood, which includes a gallery space, an archives room for the Fan Family art collection, and the main lobby vertical circulation from the upper floors. Okay, we'll scoot up. There has been, for those of you who have ever been in this building, we're happy to show you through the building, an interstitial level. It's been called many things, but it's never been called a story. And it's roughly this L-shaped piece running from Brandwood west and then across the narrow space that fronts on Central, but we're going to re-envision that as a mezzanine space. And currently it's a collection of very small, dark, scary spaces. It's very low ceiling height. But we're going to unify the 4 levels. We're going to open to below. And so the mezzanine will actually open and function with the smaller Central Avenue footprint. In this instance, that will be the Sing Sing Museum Visitor Center space. So they will utilize portions of that mezzanine. On the north side of the building, in a facsimile location of the original theater stairs, an atrium is going to be created. So the atrium interconnects first and second floor through the mezzanine, if you will, and scroll one more to what is really the primary level or the second floor. And the space to the right, as the plan is oriented, which really anchors the corner of Central and Brandwood, is the large 2-story original theater space. You can begin to see a division about the center of the building. That division corresponds to what was the second floor balcony-esque portion of the building. As far as we know, it never really had a sloping floor that would reflect balcony, as we're all familiar with. It was really just an upper partial level that intercommunicated with the large space. So there are going to be other multi-purpose flex spaces in various sizes. On the left-hand side of the plan, as you see it here, some of them are envisioned to the larger space to being so that it can open into the larger performance space. And then various exit components that are required for these types of uses, and a gender-neutral bathroom at the northeast corner there, which is, as many of you may or may not be aware, if you've ever visited, for example, Whole Foods at Bryant Park, it's sort of modeled after that gender-neutral bathroom collection. So it's a very robust footprint, but it's one footprint, one centralized footprint. And then there is the third floor, which is roughly a little more than half of the building footprint. And again, a very large, simple, open space, conceived as flex space, gallery space, teaching space, performance space. And that's, so those are the collection of uses, and we've defined each of those spaces and associated a parking number with those as prescribed by the village zoning code. So we'll continue. The graphics you see here were borrowed from a series of village parking studies, both analyzing existing conditions and potentials down the road. We've extracted or borrowed literally the existing condition analysis from the village code, from the village parking studies. The number you see, and I'll come back to that notion in a minute, but the ask or the reality tonight in terms of parking waiver mechanisms is 120 spaces. That number that says total 127 actually includes 7 previous spaces that we were here to discuss in association with the bookstore. But the application actually says 120. You can see the analysis chart on the right hand. Hopefully you can see it on the right hand side of the gray background image, where we've identified the collection of spaces we walk through the plan, including the first floor lobby space, because we anticipate that is a functioning gallery space to contribute to the parking. But we understand the 120 number is the optics and the sound of that number is challenging. That said, for those of you, and many of us, have waited for many years for the Olive Opera House potential to come to light. And the building has never had parking. We've actually done some investigative discussions about, well, at its most robust use during the automobile age in the manufacturing period, what were the number of workers at the facility? Nobody really knows. The number of 40 to 50 has been bounced around. There's no way to verify that. But even then, there was no associated assigned parking when it was that use. So we've come full circle back to a theater multi-purpose use for a building footprint that's been there since the late 1860s. And we have no parking to contribute. What we do feel like, extracting notions from the village study and being mindful that at some point we want to support the successful user experience for this facility, is that depending on uses and interface with potential users, suggested parking flyers will be created. So that anticipating larger use potential programs and even smaller use, more periodic, for example, a dance group who would use this building once a month over the course of 12 months. Recommendations would be made as to where they might find parking. If there is a large event, and let's face it, large events are not going to occur here daily or likely even weekly. But as a part of the interface with attendees, there would be an attempt to model where they would park or make suggestions, because everyone wants to not only see the building be successful, but support a user-friendly, positive experience in visiting downtown and finding parking and going to the building. So I don't know that I can lend more perspective on the parking waiver order of magnitude ask of 120 spaces, other than it is where we are and what we have in our laps.
What's the largest, of the performance or, kind of collective spaces in there? What's the largest occupancy that you would have in any one of those spaces if it was full?
Using 30 or 15 square foot per person.
No, yeah.
You want to use zoning numbers or building code numbers?
So,
I'll
I want to take, so I wanted, based on kind of building code, like what would you be allowed to have if there was a performance, a large performance there? How many people are you packing in there on a Saturday night for the concert?
So the zoning calculations related to spaces, 103 spaces for a single largest use.
Right, I think, and I'm trying to take away from what the zoning code says, and just like practically speaking, how many folks?
How many people?
And I'm trying to avoid that question because I don't have that data, other than to suggest, I know that we've examined realistically 170 people in that large space.
That's helpful.
And I don't know if that was the number that was siphoned through the zoning calculations to reach 103, but that's kind of where we are.
Right. I mean, I know that those are different. The zoning calculations they're as you described, it's different math and it's different points. And we're looking at a parking waiver, so we have to think about what's realistically being there. There's also, we'll talk about the parking waiver and how it's written in the village and kind of what our role is in evaluating that as well, which is a third strand conversation. That's just helpful to have in our heads.
I would suggest, based on the data, both included in the presentation, that it's sincere, right? We try to use realistic numbers because the building owners, again, want to have a sense of how are we really going to manage this successfully over time.
Are there any other images in the presentation?
Oh, yeah,
there's the outside of the building. Okay, so we don't need, like I said, we are going to
the presentation
take off with them, but
and several of you are familiar with this. Is a hybrid presentation both to the HPC as a part of the DRI grant trajectory. It's a part of our interface with SHPO, believe it or not. SHPO's involved in this also. To what extent we don't completely know yet. But those are the main periods, the three periods the building's architecture between its original inception, which was sort of the Second Empire aesthetic. Unfortunately, the middle photograph, which was captured during one of the fires, you can't really articulate how the building was homogenized a bit, but in the middle photograph, it was more like the third photograph, which is roughly from the 20s through today, quite frankly, when it was really modified to support manufacturing use. So if you scroll up just a little bit more, Maddie. That's how the building exists today. And and to the left is where we're proposing to head in the immediate future. And we have larger versions of the image on the left. I mean, I would characterize the modifications to the exterior are they're fairly isolated. In the big picture, they're fairly benign. And they're bent more towards a re-envisioning for an adaptive reuse as opposed to a rehabilitation for historic restoration. And I mean, and Dan, you can speak to this. The Department of the Interior defined those lanes differently. And so, and the diagram coming up in the next slide is the matrix of all of the stakeholders that we're connecting the dots with here currently. So many of them we've already connected the dots with. So we'll continue to go up. Manny will get to some of these are the supporting dialogue elements with HPC and SHPO regarding how we're going to treat the brick. We're not going to restore the brick to pristine conditions. We were guilty of rendering in the early parts of the HPC, the DRI presentations, this gloriously restored brick facade. That's not what we're proposing. But we are going to clean it. And there was a product used recently at the auto parts store fairly successfully from a recommendation from HPC that we're going to utilize and see where it gets us. So we'll continue. So you can see it, architecturally, it's focused on the northeast corner of the building down Brandreth. And that is the primary entrance to all of the upper floor multi-purpose spaces, small gallery space on the first floor, and the Fan family's art archive room. Margaret Fan, I don't know if you're familiar with her artwork. She was an amazing artist. She did very large paintings. Her art was stored here for probably 30 years. I had the privilege of seeing some of it in that storage room some 20 years ago, and it survived the last major fire miraculously. It has been moved to a storage unit until we recreate the archive storage room. So, and then obviously the other area of focus is Central Avenue, and slightly at the corner of Central and Brandreth, and which is bringing transparency and proportioned openings back to the streetscape. The building has always had these quirky collection to the left on Central Avenue because it always had this quirky fire exit stair from the upper stories. It had a very small retail space, and then it had the larger space where the bookstore is today. That composition, as the sidewalk really begins to drop off, is the fire exit store from the upper floors, and where Sing Sing Visitor Center, Museum Visitor Center will occupy. There are very subtle elements that remain from the original building, small cast iron pilasters. They're currently white today. If you scroll up a little bit, Manny, you can see the white remnants of the pilasters. We're proposing to paint those black. In the center photograph, you can really see, so that is the lower corner of Brandreth where we're reimagining the primary entry, and you can see the years of discombobulation that are there.
Technical.
We really looked at a number of ways to treat this, and and reimagining it in a very, what we feel like is a very subtle, modern interpretation of marquee and entrance as quietly as possible, though, but enough to give it some anchor from the five corners, is what's covering that collection of openings and vintages of brick, etc. The cornice is going to remain intact. It's going to be repaired. It's going to be painted. The gutters and leaders are going to remain where they are. They're going to become copper. They're going to become a little more robust. The brick, we know we are not getting the brick completely pristine. The paint, when the building was painted in the 30s, it probably was painted twice. And that, as best as we know, was never cleaned. It just fell off. So that is natural paint deterioration in some kind of modeled form. We're going to test a very non-invasive paint remover one time. We're going to do a test panel, probably Dan with us. Whatever that yields is as far as we're going to go. If we still have this modeled white brick, that's what we're going to be comfortable with. Let's scroll up a little bit more, Manny, because I feel like I've spoken enough. Obviously, we all know, we're all familiar with Jacob Burns, and I'm not saying we're recreating Jacob Burns at this location. But there were two buildings, or at least two buildings, that when we cast our eyes around the landscape, especially in the tri-state region, that building stands out. As long as you scroll up a little bit more, there is a project in Brooklyn that you may be familiar with that we visited that felt a little more aligned with where we're headed in terms of adaptive reuse and kind of leaving some found funkiness in place, and then focusing on various areas of emphasis, and while we're trying to bring a fresh and modern feel to it. So the entry rendering is to the upper left, Matt, if you could scroll down a little bit, thank you. The color of the background material here is lighter than the final selection and the sample boards that we brought tonight. I think it's representative in other renderings a little more faithfully. We continue to scroll up a little bit more. I mean, now we get into the actual aluminum system typology, the colors, the patterns, the door styles and rails. You can see that in the lower right-hand corner is an existing, I think that's the Brandreth corner to the entrance. These weird, very dysfunctional sill panels were installed in the 30s that were jettisoning. The windows are going to be the windows at the first level here are going to be removed. Now, we think it's questionable those windows were ever appropriate in any circumstance, along with the second floor and third floor windows as they exist. However, they are just modern enough in terms of function. They have insulated glazing, so we don't intend to replace the upper floor windows. We don't necessarily agree the upper floor windows are reflective of what we would select today or are historically correct. They are what they are. We're going to take the dark bronze, almost black color and run with it. We're probably going to add an insulating sash to the interior side, both for acoustics and to enhance our thermal performance. Sorry, thank you. This is more of a composite overview of all of the elements. Clearly, the Brandreth image, again, we were guilty of depicting a pristine brick, and we're not going to have a pristine brick. It's going to be more like the lower image, the lower existing image, most likely. The signage we feel like is, you know, there's some very subtle elements to the signage, and then there is one element that we knew was going to be a point of discussion all along. It has been. I think it's fair to say it's been welcomed. There is a very, may I approach the bench?
Go for it.
I didn't bring it. There is a very, very peculiar door opening above the word Brandreth. Maddie,
I don't even see that. What?
see the word E in Brandreth?
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Yeah, just go up.
Okay, hold on.
It was introduced by the manufacturing company to get things in and out of the building. And we explored numerous ways of treating that. And we finally circled back to, well, what if we put a media panel in there? And the media panel became art and communication and information. It's an element by default, but, and we thought about.
Sorry, you mean like, it's like a screen, like a?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Like a screen.
Like
Like a high resolution, not a pixelated sign, it's a high resolution media screen.
and that's on that entire opening
This guy
or
here?
that?
You see, if you go up to the rendering, right there. You
Oh,
see-
this.
No,
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 no, no,
right there.
That.
above,
So.
Yeah.
right there.
Oh, I don't think I ever realized that that's what that was. Okay. I thought that was like,
To point that little,
gotcha. All right. And that's what was, so that was, I see, got it. So that was some sort of like a cock lock, like door open, yeah, and they just hoisted stuff into there.
yeah, everybody has come up with a suggestion as to what it was for. And frankly, it still has door hardware on it. So I think now, as a part of the sustainability initiatives, that the grant money actually is, you know, there's a chunk of the grant money that was actually provided towards that. We are going to have solar panels. We are going to have a fairly robust, modern set of exterior mechanical equipment, but the solar panels are going to be in the west and the east. The east is the smallest triangle of roof footprint. The west is the most hidden, especially from the five corners. So we feel like that has a very low impact, visual impact by default. I mean, if you realize the photographs we've been seeing, if you go downtown and you walk into the five corners, you certainly don't see the west, which is the largest array. You would struggle to see the little triangle on the south, I mean, not the east, on the south hip. So, and there is an existing elevator. If you scroll up again. Well, so, you know, this view, you don't really realize the hip roof above. And there's the legendary door to nowhere there. You can see the performance of the brick cleaning product, which performed fairly well in the building up the street. We'll keep scrolling. Thinking I want to get to, we'll come back to this. This is a more detailed view and discussion about
That's the end.
it is, I'm sorry. I thought there were views of the west side in the existing photographs. I'm sure there are. I wanted to point out the existing elevator penthouse. Apparently they're not in here. So the equipment bay, the roof mounted equipment bay will be on the northwest corner of the roof behind the existing elevator penthouse. And I'm sure that, scroll again, I'm sorry, Manny, I apologize. Well, I mean, kind
Other
of
way.
other way.
I think it's on A3.
It may be, I mean, it's easy for me to say it's very benign. there's only one element that anyone would ever see, and that's perhaps from the new development down the road.
Yeah, I mean, can you see is that the chimney or the elevator penthouse sticking out of the top?
Those are actually the existing theater exhaust system, like your attic fan. These were these big attic fan pits.
And so are there any other changes going on the roofscape?
No,
It's just the addition of the,
yeah, and actually the roof shingles that were replaced after the most recent fire.
Yeah.
They're staying.
not even doing any roof work.
There was one where I know I saw the solar panels.
Yeah,
Yeah, you could see in a rendering, you could see the solar panels.
Yeah,
array.
That's
Yeah,
So that. I'm sorry, I'll borrow a pen. To the left there, you see the little elevator penthouse on right back there.
oh, gotcha, yeah.
Yeah, and behind that, you see where the exterior roof equipment will occur.
Okay. All right, so, yeah, so. There's,
And so I'm not to interrupt.
yeah,
I'm happy to yield.
so what I would do is, because, I think you're here as a member of the public effectively for this meeting, so we'll open up the public hearing, and then we would love, to get your input. So kind of working towards there. I just kind of want to get any initial reaction from the board. Like I said, I think we're going to listen to the historic board. I think we have that feedback. So I want to kind of any feedback that we get to be in that context. And maybe we can open it up to the public sooner rather than later, so we can hear from them on any comments. And then maybe we can discuss the architectural components quickly first. Like I said, we're looking at another village volunteer body that's really dissected this. But then obviously I want to spend some time a little bit on the parking issue as well. But I do want to kind of just keep this in our normal order of things, which is let's have a board conversation first. We'll open it up to the public hearing, and we'll go from there. So I guess starting on the architectural components, because that's where we left off on here. Do we have any kind of questions, comments, thoughts from the board initially from seeing the presentation?
Well, I think it's really exciting. I guess, a little bit more curious about the signage and lighting. Is there any lighting that we haven't seen or that's not currently on the building that's going to be added?
There is lighting that's not currently on the building. In the Brandreth, I hesitate calling it a marquee because it's kind of a canopy awning thingy. That has recessed lighting in it. And it's going to have some very subtle uplighting for the upper portion of that new valance piece. There is a very subtle sign that says Brandreth Gallery above the awning. So that's kind of going to be lit from below from the awning surface. There is a light that was approved as a part of the Hudson Valley Book for Humanities signage. It's a very subtle little tube spot sign light. There will be some lighting down central by the museum entrance and the exit door. That is not included here yet.
And actually, to that point, so the Hudson Books for Humanity, the entrance is going to stay where it is. And then I'm not entirely clear about this space for the Sing Sing Prison Museum, and they'll have separate entrances. There's no connection between the space.
So back to the first question. It will be in a facsimile of where it is. If you currently enter this peculiar door against the corner pilaster. So that space, right, there's a brick corner pilaster. That space is going to be opened up. And there are two pilasters on Brandreth and the inference of those on Central. So there's going to be a vestibule, an exterior corner vestibule created. So you could enter from Brandreth or Central, and that door will be recessed, but it will be facing west. We could show it. We could show the plan, but we don't have to go back.
It might be good just to have these up on the, just as we're talking,
Yeah.
that way we can. refer
I'd
to
like
them.
to see what
Okay.
you just said.
Okay. Hold on. Plans.
God bless you, man.
My contacts are drying on like.
We'll just watch it load slowly.
Suspense.
I almost brought, I did bring the one parking diagram as an old school board, and I thought about bringing the other ones and I didn't.
Yeah.
We can go down, yeah.
You know what? It may be the other presentation. I'm sorry. It was the first plans in that 11. In that, in this, the next to the bottom.
This is what we
I
looked
think
at
that
first. This is what I just opened.
Yeah, we want to go back to the 1/11/23.
111.
And just, I mean, it was a very busy December and January. We were at the HPC twice. The Village Board of Trustees, with SHPO. So,
There's that corner cut.
yeah, you can see it there.
Okay. But there's a similar recess into the building now, just a little further. No, those
That
doors.
door is right at the building plane. It's very awkward and it couldn't, I mean, we're convinced it was never really that way.
So the bookstore is occupying all that space,
Yes.
including the table and and then the museum is sort of where that line is. I'm not understanding.
Where's the museum?
Yeah,
Right here, the narrow, very narrow lower rectangle. But they will utilize the loft above that open and communicates with that space.
So the bookstore is underneath that rectangle? and-
No, the bookstore
That
is,
rectangle.
the bookstore is the largest
You
piece.
know what, I'm disoriented. I'm looking at the wrong corner. I got that.
the grandeur of this at the top.
Yeah.
there.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, I see. Okay.
I want to take a step back, just, and this is maybe for staff, just in terms of we talked about the lighting and the signs, but that was a board of trustees. Vote that's already been looked at and approved by.
Yeah, and the HPC also saw the signs and the lighting.
Okay, and that includes, I mean, there are several different signs we just talked about, so we're all of these included in that submission, so we have the studio, the main Hall of Opera, we have the bookstore. And was there any separate signage that I missed for the Sing Sing museum?
Yeah, it's going to be on the transom van just above their opening. It's.
But
again,
that
it's gonna
hasn't
be-
been finalized yet, right?
No, but we indicated a facsimile of it, knowing we would, not knowing exactly what those mechanics would be. I mean, we had a lot of mechanics going, a lot of gears spinning.
What was the lighting? Because I mean, some of these are.
No, the lighting above that entrance, in full disclosure, was not discussed.
Okay, so that's not part of this particular.
And I'll say this, I'll just say it. We talked about the lighting underneath the awning and the entrance and the marquee.
Mhm.
We didn't talk about any of the lighting with the board of trustees.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
But
Yeah.
what,
Right,
what,
for
but
the
that's,
Trustees,
yeah.
so they're focused on the
On
marquee
the
and they,
easement
right,
portion,
the
right.
right,
Because it
the
goes into the
HP,
village right
right,
of way.
the HPC was focused on all the other elements.
Okay, so there's no specific signage design or any other component that went to the BOT, it was simply to put
Yeah.
that projection over the
Right.
public right away. Okay.
Ironically, one last item,
And-
part of the village code that we would have to comply with, beyond zoning, related to the marquee is anything over 4 feet or over is required.
To have
be-
lighting, yes.
All right, yeah, other board comments here as we're pushing towards the public conversation of this.
I think it's very interesting, and it's a lot to take in, actually. Can we just give recommendations, like what we feel at this point? Or?
Yeah, I think, give our thoughts. Again, like I said, because this has already been reviewed and approved by the historic board, and they kind of take precedence in these types of architectural reviews. I just want to kind of, anything we kind of put out there, just kind of in that spirit.
Okay. So, yeah, that's good to know, because I'm not sure what exactly we'll be reviewing for BAR.
Right, right. It's an unusual kind of application where we have, this is gone through a very thorough vetting process by another body. But because the code requires the BAR to also review it, it's kind of like two reviews of a similar type. But because the historic review is a little bit more rigorous and kind of more specific to the appropriateness of this alteration in the context of this historic district, our review is I think we want to be deferential to the determinations that board made.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna comment, I think that's very exciting, and I really appreciate that something is happening to this building. Just one thing that just came to mind when you showed the St. Anne's warehouse reference, I thought that was actually pretty interesting and appropriate, because it's kind of like, I get it, that's what you're going for in terms of the refurbishing of the existing. I would just say there's something interesting about that reference, is that you can kind of more or less clearly see what is new versus what is not, because that kind of cornice, kind of new lighted, appendage to the old. I'm not saying I'm not saying that's applicable for us, but there's something interesting that you can kind of see the new has a cohesiveness to it versus the old. So, I guess when I was looking at the renderings, the proposed renderings, there's several entrances, there's the Olive entrance, Olive Opera House entrance, and the store, the bookstore, and the third entrance with the visitor center, the Sing Sing Museum. So there's a lot going on there in terms of orientation.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of maybe just, as you take the next steps, I'm not sure what exactly what are the next steps, but as you take the next steps in the design, just to consider, the cohesiveness of it, or actually the differentiation of it, there's something there, because that's kind of like the new addition. So I think that there's something there to be, as I'm sure, to be looked into too, so you can make this, as successful as the other references that you pointed out. That's kind of my big picture overall.
Yeah.
Comments.
Yeah, so I think maybe because we can continue to have this conversation and be in a public setting. So can I just have a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion to open the public hearing.
Isabel Wynn, I second that motion.
Any objections? Objections, motion carries. We're in a public hearing.
Yeah. Dan Garwood, HPC chairman. I appreciate the comments. I'm not following exactly what part of the building you're referring to.
I was just commenting about the new additions, which I guess are mostly the entrance areas. The
So
entry,
you're
right?
talking along the main street? Or
Yeah,
you're talking about where the new canopy is?
The new canopy, the Olive Opera House, new canopy,
Oh, okay.
Brandes Gallery, and how that relates to the bookstore, which is kind of like a new entry area as well, and how that keeps going on, I guess, Central. Did I get that right? Avenue, or where the visitor center entrance is. There, I can see that there's like the beginning of either making that one thing, but I kind of don't see it all as acting as one thing right now, or maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's different feel, different looks and feel for different entry points of the different uses of this building. That's just, I don't know if that helps you at all. That's kind of what my initial reaction.
Well, yeah, I think John can refer to it. We thought it just reflected the two different types of tenancy and orientations. And I think, when you look at the three-dimensional view, and I think there are some three-dimensional views that seems to, all work as a whole.
I'm sorry, Dan, do you mind coming up to the microphone if you're gonna continue?
Right. No, I appreciate the comment. I don't want to speak for John. I think just from my recollection of the meeting, we sort of recognize that there are two different functions, two different orientations. And certainly it's understandable what you're saying. I can see your point for what that's worth, my own opinion. I think when you look at the perspective of it, there's another view down the bottom of the page. Somewhere, it just seems to all, fit in very nicely because it's not, obviously, it's not very adjacent. There's so many other things going on.
Maybe we could just zoom in on the bottom right hand photo.
But, I'll defer to John if he wants to reconsider any kind of modifications in that light.
Well,
If you just for process wise, if any
Yeah.
reconsideration, it will have to go back to the HPC.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to make sure everyone.
well, let's
Yeah,
let's hear all of this discussion and then maybe we'll.
yeah, no, and I guess as part of this conversation, look, I mean, we're looking at these kind of these two different interventions. I think it's helpful to have your kind of feedback and impact here, and input from what your board deliberated or could be, which is, I mean, public record as well. I guess I do have one question for you guys, just as far as the video board and what your takeaway was on
That
that.
came up as well.
Yeah.
And maybe now I should try to just recall the points we raised that may, I think, be in the certificate of appropriateness that I haven't yet seen.
Mhm.
But just to take the most recent point you made, the board, the electronic board, we had some concern about content or whether it's going to be motion driven. I think there's going to be something written in the C of A that stipulated that, there's some review process of how the content of the board or electronic display is set up. One thing that came about was, obviously if there's a museum there or an art gallery, you don't want provocative content electronically displayed. So I think certainly that it sounded like the
We came up with the board of trustees also.
Oh, and okay.
Right,
Thank
I
you.
mean, that was a subject matter at the board of trustees.
How about like just the level of brightness and when is this operating 24/7? Is it like what's going to be the impact on the
The
neighborhood?
intent is not to have it operate 24/7. And the intent would, and it's easy for me to use the word intent, how that's all codified at some point. And we, the owners, the clients are more than happy to participate in articulating the use of it. And perhaps even the content also. But the intent is not a sign. It never was intended to be a sign, but it was intended to provide information along with perhaps art images. How I can articulate it further than that, I can't sitting here today.
So when it's not on, what is it gonna look like?
It's a black sheet of glass.
Or it could be, I mean, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but since it's all electronic and programmable, that could be changed too in the future to something.
It could be the Yule log. It
Yeah.
could be whatever we want.
And it would seem like they would want to do something if they could
Yeah.
24/7, so long as it's not bright or gaudy or
Right.
provocative. I mean, I think provocative is maybe something the trustees would be, I think you mentioned the trustees would be concerned about it, so.
That's a whole other.
That's a whole other topic.
It's not a nod to Times Square.
Well, that's right, but that's, I think, a concern, right? So like that's
And we've had that, right? And so, but, again, now we could really go down the rabbit hole. It's not as large as the high schools. Yeah.
the one
On Highland.
Yeah.
This is not that large. It wouldn't be used in that manner. And I'm not casting dispersions at that one. I'm just for purposes. of-
I the precedent is a nice thing to discuss.
But it is, we understand, it's a new, along with the gender, we're gonna have we feel like the first gender neutral bathroom bank. And maybe the first art media panel in us.
Is there, I mean, in any kind of approval, and maybe Linda, this is a you question, as far as conditions on, I mean, because it's not a sign, but it's a sign. We've never, at least as the body is currently convened, I'm not aware of any similar appurtenance that's been reviewed where it could look like anything, right? On any given day. And I also, don't know how such a thing or, would be kind of governed, administered. I don't know how that would work in terms of a condition that would allow for some sort of protection, really just protections from the public and the neighbors for how that sign is used.
So you could certainly like limit the hours that it can be illuminated and the levels of illumination. It's content that is a little, you have to be a little more careful with.
Sure.
I think the other thing too is I know there are certain conditions that were put on by the HPC. I know the resolution hasn't been fully written yet.
Mhm.
So we'll probably want to make sure that those two conditions don't conflict with each
So
other.
we would want to see their
Yeah.
resolution and their conditions first.
Clearly, this client wants this to be a successful component in a larger successful project. And are not going to push back on any mechanism to try to manage this so everybody's comfortable.
Right.
We are excited about it, but we recognize it's new. And it, I guess potentially could go awry.
Do we have and I don't know if this is a John question or kind of a staff question, the controls we talk about, illumination levels. Like, I don't have the technical expertise to say it can only, the condition can only be, is that something that we could say, the condition could relate to a brightness as set by the village engineer or color sessions, or how can we
Right,
work that
so
in?
we can also require that there's there are some requirements like no illumination, 0 foot candle spot property boundary or something like that. We could do that. We could also set the number of kelvins, because a lot of times 3, but it just depends on this particular sign, it's different than when you're dealing with like residential. But it's something that we could ask for more information from the applicant on.
I was going to suggest that.
Yeah, in
It-
terms of lighting and the projection of lighting from that sign.
Right, depends on
Yeah.
how it works, how
Right.
you can limit it.
If there was the general notion that this was going to be embraced, then we're more than happy to provide a more in-depth examination narrative of the technology, the actual equipment, the photometrics, the intent, the image intent.
I think that's
If
what we would need. the
I sense that
photometric.
at least everyone's warming up to the idea. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, it's brand new, right? So
They're just learning about it.
So maybe provide more information on the
Yeah.
photometrics of that sign.
yeah,
for next
I think we
Meeting.
need to see that. With that, to the degree that hasn't been looked at by the other boards as far as the lighting on the marquees and we're looking at photometrics, is that something we can just kind of look at? and
Yeah,
just make sure.
absolutely.
Again, I'm just like looking at, all the things that make this project great. I think are things that could bother some people, and that's, having this big glowing orb in the middle of the night. And we'll talk about in a second, the parking and people coming through here. So I just want to make sure that we're balancing that conversation. As far as, I just want to kind of wrap up the BAR conversation as quickly as we can here. I know we didn't talk about the solar panels. I thought the presentation was very clear. I thought it was very, not, knowing that building, you're almost never going to see that roof. And if there are any comments there, and then the fenestration changes were pretty straightforward. Curious to see how the cleaning turns out. But
I have questions about the museum entrance and the Olive Opera House sign.
Mhm.
Like, I personally really don't like that font or the color of that sign. It just doesn't go with the rest, like the color is just completely off for me. So I didn't know if that was something we commented on, or, it's just me, everybody else loves it. And then the museum, where's the museum entry? I feel like I didn't really get to see what the museum was gonna look, the museum entry was gonna look like.
Let's, so is there a large, right? So if you pan
the other one,
left,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and zoom
That
in,
one?
it's
Yeah.
a very small,
far left of the.
the bookstore is is 2/3 of that elevation.
So I think
The museum is,
So, but that whole frontage is now glass. It's gonna be
is
glass.
glazing and aluminum glazing systems. And they're gonna be, they're infill transit panels.
I can't really tell what that's gonna look like.
But
from
are
that
those
picture.
transom panels are not, that they're all glazed, right? It's not, you don't have any opaque panels.
No, but there is, you can see above the door head at the museum entrance and the exit door, for example.
What does it look like now? I just feel like you're taking away so much brick from the front of that building.
We were actually taking very little.
It just feels like you are.
This is
Yeah.
existing.
That's what it,
Right, it's not
Yeah.
brick, that lower level's not brick.
So it's
Okay.
it's extending it down.
Historic.
that's what I was thinking, but I didn't know what it looked like.
And really, if you look at the building to the right, the street plane of all of these buildings, and it's not unique to Austin. It was originally mostly glass and wood storefront. They were meant to be very transparent spaces that pedestrians interfaced with. That was essentially taken away from the original Opera House, and we're reintroducing it.
So I just feel like, I don't know, it's such a glaring modern design with this old building. Like when you show the storefronts in that other building, they're like integrated into the old building. And now you just have this modern glass, like almost skyscraper-y looking frontage to this beautiful brick building. Well,
It is modern. There's no doubt about it.
I have a problem.
And that's the intent.
I don't like the juxtaposition of that, but that's my
Um,
opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's, and I think the precedents that he showed, I think reflected that. I mean, if we're talking about getting some additional information, information on the lighting. You talked, John, about the existing cast iron columns that are gonna remain. There's still no, is all of this designed to then match whatever your storefront system? It'll all kind of blend, so you'll try to blend. I don't know that it reads so well in that particular rendering, but I think that there, from the other documents and from the conversation that you're having, I mean, it certainly seems like there's an attempt to take these kind of remnant historical elements and marry them together with the newer materials. I don't disagree necessarily that maybe and you kind of acknowledged before that the colors in some of these renderings. I think you had mentioned that there are some materials you have, especially with the backdrop of the that read as lighter or different on these drawings. Not to mention the beautiful red brick that will.
Yeah, I'm saying
Will be
that, just as an aside, we talked about that at our meeting, that there's some management of expectations, and John's aware of it. It's just a graphical thing, but
yeah,
obviously the brick is, as John mentioned, it's gonna stay the way you see it in the lower photos. And the muntins are very clear and dark in the proposed elevations. It almost looks like you're putting in sash, but you're not. And so that may also change your perception a little bit too about the intervention. I think we talked about that, John. You recognize it. For some people, you might even think new windows are being put in, and it changes the scale a little bit too when you look at the upper windows in the proposed elevation, because he's not changing them.
Right,
It's
and
just
part of,
something behind it.
when I suggest that, or share the notion that this is a modern interpretation, it's not that the language of street front glazing systems, pattern, scale, proportion has been ignored. The proportion of that pattern of the metal storefront and the transoms and the horizontal line of expression at the street, all of those were taken from the historical images, borrowed. That intent, that pattern, that scale were borrowed from the original historic images. If we did the science of glazing original glass area to proposed glass area, I can't stand here and say it would be exactly the same, but it will be very similar.
Just one other thing is, to open up the storefront, as John had mentioned on the main street, changes perception as well. And I can see why somebody would think a lot is being taken away from the building, but in essence, to really make it, engage with the pedestrians walking by and be able to look in, you do have to take these solid surfaces away from the main entrance, the way it is now. I mean, I can certainly understand though why that could be a jolt to someone looking at it for the first time.
This building is a wall. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a wall and it's too bad, right? So what they're doing here is, I mean, I remember when the bookstore first opened, I walked up to the building, I was like, where is it?
Right.
And so, kind of restoring a storefront is like getting rid of the factory.
It's adding
putting it in
depth
public
to the
building.
5 corners,
Yeah.
right? It's providing that jewel box.
There's nothing that brings the bottom to the top. There's nothing that meshes those two. You have
So let's,
great brick and then this modern thing on the bottom. There's no transition.
I would suggest if you look at the historical buildings that are, it's.
There is a
there
transition, though.
Streetscape base, it's not masonry.
Yeah, but they have
It's
a little transition. They have a thing between the brick and the glass. There's a transition of wood. Not that I'm saying that's what needs to be here, but this is just like brick and then,
Well,
I don't know,
I
it's
think
just
John's
being
working with
really-
the existing conditions and they have a budget. too.
Right. oh, I get that.
It's certainly an interesting point you raised, and it occurred to me for a moment too, but there's a practical reality too of what he can do with what he has. Regarding the solar panels, I'm going by my memory now, but we had approved solar panels on another project earlier, and our sort of precedent now is that, a little contrary to what you see in the rendering, the solar panels will have black framing, so you won't see the size of each panel, or it'll be diminished. It'll just look like a black sort of intervention on the roof. Obviously, there'll be some joints that will be visible, but not as visible as we think it is, and possibly in that rendering. And of course, as I think everybody acknowledges, it's really hard to see that anyways from any public viewpoint. And as also John mentioned, I think that's the last item on our C of A is, we'll be on site to advise and consent when the brick facade is sort of being rejuvenated with this sort of palimpsest, aesthetic, and which we think will be very nice.
Are you just doing a power wash? Or you can use a
No, there's
Soko or
No, there's actually a coating that peels off.
so you do like a peel away or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it's
That might
called.
it's called, yeah.
But
Yeah, no, that's what, yeah, there's peel away is a product that you would.
Adam, the past chairman, first raised that product's name. I hadn't been familiar with it, but
Yeah.
that I think is new.
and
I
it
know
was
we
used up
use
the
that all the
street
Yeah, no, okay, so
on the, we have it in this image. It has, I forget the address.
The auto store near the
Yeah,
auto.
The top of Maine.
Yeah, on the top of
you
me.
may be surprised how much you get off actually with that stuff. Okay, so, sorry, but I do want to refocus this. So we're gonna, I think we've given some thoughts. I think getting some additional information really to clarify the design that's been presented, I think is really what we're talking about. Specifically on the screen, I think is the biggest issue. But I think to the degree that you can, where these
Lighting.
renderings make lighting, but also just where any of these images or renderings are misleading, or that can be kind of corrected in a way that
Aren't misleading.
aren't misleading, or kind of showing us materials I know that you're planning to use. I think any of that information would be helpful.
But you have your sample for it.
I do.
Oh, and
So,
we also, that was another stipulation that we would be allowed to, that we would see the proposed material for the window system.
okay,
And,
I do have these. I know we don't want to dwell on them. I was just gonna leave them here.
okay, yeah, and then I don't even know, we should probably talk internally just in terms of how we present certain materials, because it's really hard for the public to see anything that's up on the board on these cameras.
A few comments.
Yeah, please.
So in regards to the fiber cement panels, it shows that they will be surface mounted.
Yes,
What is how proud is it from the brick wall?
they're going to be, as precisely as I can say, about 1 5/8 inches out from the existing brick. We may be able to improve upon that. Our original intent was to improve upon that. Because then the question, there are several questions, right? There's the right of way question, right? If we're actually, but we don't have an accurate enough survey to know, we might not be that. But then there's the treating the edge. We know we're gonna treat the edge with, because it's gonna be essentially a rain screen assembly, and we're gonna treat the edge with aluminum to match the marquee and everything else. So to answer your question, as of today, we're 1 5/8 inches out from the facing.
Okay, then that leads me to my second question. So for the canopy, usually there should be some sort of drainage
Yes,
for the canopy.
yes.
I would just like some consideration to not put like a drain pipe, because I think this is a really nice addition. So something that's concealed.
That's an excellent point. What we did discuss that. Was it with you?
Yeah.
With the trustees? And so that's a good point. We need to go back and show you that.
In the internal drain, was that, will that just go to a internal leader?
Internal leader there are no internal leaders in the building. They're all exterior. So we would likely, if I could, Maddie, right at the end, the last slide is okay. So on the right-hand side, which is the north side, right? We would come out cleverly from that down the corner of the building there, but we clearly need to.
Got it.
I think it would resolve.
Isabel, I never, did you have?
My other comment was in regards to maybe the clarifications of the finishes, because the rendering, as I look through the rendering of the canopy, one of them seems a little bit dark. So my comment was, it appears a little too dark.
Well, we have that material sample. You mean the metal itself or the background
The
material?
fiber cement, the gray fiber cement against the green signage over.
That's the actual sample.
That's the darkness of it. Okay.
Can that be submitted kind of?
We're just gonna leave this here.
Yeah.
Or-
No, we have a photograph of that submitted to Maddie.
We could have the scan.
Yeah.
Send it to you as a scan.
Sure, that would work. Leave a flatbed scanner. Yeah, that should-
Oh.
Paper jam.
Yeah,
Chair,
that way we can all, everybody can appreciate it.
I think that's really my comments. Everything else has already been addressed previously already.
Just kind of being mindful of the time, so we spent a lot of time here. And it sounds like we're gonna ask for some minor additional comments. We did not talk about at all about the parking, and I do want to touch base on that. So if there's any additional information or clarification that we need. But I do just want to, preface any talk on the parking, and I know, John referenced that we did look at another project in this building where we granted that the 7 parking spot waiver. I don't know, do we have the language of that law?
Yeah,
Yeah, to me, I think it's important because there's effectively, we're looking at
it's in the middle of the page.
yeah, no, I do, sorry. So the code is pretty prescriptive in terms of what we can and cannot do when it comes to a parking waiver. And I just want to, while we're having this conversation, read this into the record. Actually, this says the planning board can waive the parking, but I believe that the law says it shall.
Yeah.
Waive. So, and that, which is the way that it's currently written.
It's not a lot of discretion.
There's not a lot of,
As
right.
written, yeah.
So that kind of, if the following conditions are met, the board shall grant a waiver. Which is different from saying we have the option to do it. So number 1 or letter A, the changes from one permitted or conditional use in the district to another permitted or conditional use in the district. That is the case here, right? Where there's, in fact, we're not even looking at conditional uses. These are as of right uses. So it's a step higher. The proposal does not involve construction of a new building or alterations or additions to an existing building, which will result in an increase of gross floor area that will take away already existing off-street parking spaces, and the planning board shall make a finding that the proposed new construction or addition will not be able to provide any additional off-street parking due to the existing conditions of the site. So, I mean, in this case, they're not making the building any bigger. They're not adding any square footage, certainly none that would take away existing parking, not to mention that there is no existing parking on the site, nor is there any room for any existing parking on the site. So, again, that condition is there plus. The proposal does not result in the loss of existing off-street parking spaces. Again, they're not doing any work that would take away that. The proposal does not result in the loss of existing, I just wrote that twice. And D, the new use shall continue to have access to any parking spaces which the existing use in the same location was granted access, which is true, but there was no, which is to say that the existing use was not granted any access to any special parking, nor will this. So there is no change. And I think, the spirit of this is to say that you have a building that needs to be, someone wants to use, it's existing, there is no parking, what do you do? And I think that question is kind of what those conditions were designed to drive at. So, I know we asked questions about how many people are going to be going here and what will that impact be. I think those are important just for us to kind of talk about and understand. But then we look at what we're being charged with as a board. It's almost, the code says they need 127 or 120 spots in this instance. They don't have them, they meet these criteria, the board shall grant it. So I think if we're looking to come back with some additional information, I think it's okay for us to kind of finalize that conversation the next time we come together. But I just wanted to kind of read that out on the record and have us all on the same page here for those of you who maybe have not been involved with a determination like this before. And then just open up again, any other questions on that parking, on the code or on what the applicant is presented to us related to parking.
I actually had questions about what he presented to us related to parking. That is existing parking. That is not proposed because there's a parking garage proposed for downtown.
That's what the demand would be.
Right, so he had a,
That's the zoning.
Yes.
Oh, you mean the thing where he, the study where he showed existing
It's someone's there today.
take into account, or we have to look
New
at
parking.
new parking that is, as far as I know, coming as part of the bigger picture of the downtown revitalization. Just want to put that on
Yeah.
record.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. It's another important thing to think about. And any other questions on the parking issue? Okay. I just wanted, there is nobody else in the room. We opened up a public hearing. There's nobody else in the room to speak. And I don't believe, kind of before we move on to the evening, that we have anybody else. If there is anybody, there's nobody else even in the attendees list. What's that?
There's just one.
There's just one. So from the Board of Trustees. So, and I mean, this one I will ask, have you received anything from the public on this? Because the application is a little more public. Okay, so then with that, can we have a motion to adjourn the public hearing on this application?
Motion to adjourn the public hearing, Brenda Burbach.
All right, we have a second.
Michael Aronson, second.
Okay, any objections? No objections. The motion passes. The public hearing is adjourned. So I think kind of in summary, we, I think John is very clear from the applicant's end in terms of what kind of additional information we need to clarify. I think it really focuses mostly on the impact of that media panel, but then also some of the just the clarifications and representational stuff that we talked about.
And
Follow up-
And the light.
Yeah, I'll follow up with an email tomorrow to you, John, and I'll copy you.
Okay.
The marquee, the awning drainage, right?
Yeah, right. So that can be clarified during, as part of this process. I think that would be helpful. Valerie, is there anything else that we should be talking about?
No, I think, and then I have the drain pipe question
Yeah.
as well.
Okay. Okay, so then that's it. So can we have a motion to adjourn this this application for tonight?
Is the win motion to adjourn this application for tonight?
Probably need a second motion.
Any objections? No objections, the motion passes. All right, so we're good with that. I do want to just, before we end the meeting tonight, sorry. Sorry. I know that just, and I know we have some open items, some adjourned items on at the end of the agenda.
Yes.
Sorry, you're, yeah.
Good night, John.
Good night. So, but there's nothing on the part. We don't, we were kind of,
We're not asking for any additional information right now.
is there a kumbaya on the parking unofficially?
We'll-
The way the code is written.
Yeah, well, so
Or as much of a kumbaya as there?
we give you kumbaya when we finally vote on it.
See, our e-bikes coming in now for the village master plan, so maybe it's not important.
All right, so,
Meeting these? Last question.
You're scanning them.
yeah, you're gonna scan them, so we have everything digitally. We really,
Why you get the big bucks, Valerie?
No.
all right, so again, I just wanted to kind of go through, I know we've had a bunch of items that have been sitting on the adjourned list for a long time. If we can, so there's, I think, two things, it's just, any relevant updates that we need on any of them. And then also, when an item's been adjourned for three sessions or 3 meetings in a row, it's typically removed from the agenda. And we just want to look through those items that we have right now to make sure if there's anything that's just been sitting there and nothing's happening, staff haven't heard anything, and we feel as the board, it, needs to go, back to being renoticed before they come before us again. I just want to know what those items are. So maybe I'll just kind of call out the item, and Valerie, if there's an update,
Sure.
then you'll give that, and otherwise we do. So the first adjourned matter was 173 and 175 North Island.
Right, so so two things. One, the applicant did submit comments back to the village's arborist. And then we followed up with a memo to them outlining all the other items that they need to address before they can come back to the planning board. So that's the extent of the communications this past month.
They had been asking to be put back on the
Yes.
agenda, which
They
is
have
why
been.
we told them not until you give us.
Right.
Okay, and how many adjournments has that one had at this point?
That one has had many adjournments. Yeah.
June, I think.
Okay. But you feel that there's been a communication between,
It's been constant.
Right,
communication.
so, and are we, is it two-way communication? I guess.
Yes, I would say, well, they did follow up with a submission,
Okay.
but we told them at that point, you're not ready to come back to the board because there's all these other outstanding items, including like we had the DOT, the fire department, a number of other items that they need to address, like Joe Tremeli's memo, so.
And
Okay,
they did meet with the fire department over the summer.
Right, but then they still have to follow up with changes to the site plan in order to accommodate what the fire department had to say, so.
so can I maybe suggest to the board that on that application, there's been some back and forth that maybe, and this meeting is public right now, that the applicant can review the materials that the village has provided. And if by the next meeting, they're not ready to come back to us, then we would maybe have to, that we would consider removing them from the agenda.
Okay.
Based on that.
And just so the board understands, the primary impact of being removed from the agenda is that when they come back, they have to notice again.
And so when you think about the amount of time that's passed, that's a reminder to the neighbors that this is still happening. And I think that's a service to the community to make sure that people know what's happening.
So they have to send a letter out to the neighbors that they're gonna be on the.
Right, see, as long as they're carried on the agenda, that sort of serves as a notice that they're adjourned for this meeting, but they're still on. Once we take them off, when they come back, they have to resend notices.
So it's a service for the applicant to keep them on the agenda. Okay,
It's to their advantage for sure,
It is.
for sure.
got it.
All right, then we have Riverwalk, Snowden Avenue.
Yeah, so this one is actually, they met with, had an internal meeting with staff about a little bit less than a month ago to go through the variances that they need. We are working on a memo that should be sent out to them this week as to identifying the variances that we think they need. So once that gets kind of dealt with, they'll be back before the board. They were also dealing with some wetlands and finalizing the wetland delineations and getting those maps in order. And then at that point, the board can consider potentially referring them over to the CPA.
Okay, and Although that's also there's a secret process ongoing on.
Right, so some of that goes back to the last time they were on, you did ask for some additional information as part of the secret process, so they have been working and they've been in regular communication.
Okay, right, and that one kind of feels like it has that rhythm going to it, but just for the record, how many adjournments are we now at on that?
When were they?
That one,
This
and
may be the third.
yeah, so I think that one was, I don't have the exact date on that one from Jamie, because I think the thought was with that one, since they've been really actively involved in
Yeah.
having discussions, that this one wouldn't be.
They might have been on in September, because there's staff report in September. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they were on in September.
Okay, yeah, so it was not that long ago. I think that we, the feeling is that we're in a good place. However, if we go several more meetings where we haven't
Right.
heard anything or haven't been able to speak with them, then we'll have to look at that again. 65 Main Street.
That one was last before the board in June 2022, and we don't have any updates from the applicant.
Okay, so we're at 7 months.
Yeah.
So unless the board objects, I think it makes sense to remove that item from the agenda unless we hear anything else from them.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, at the last meeting, it was discussed that they needed to do test holes.
Mhm.
And it turns out they did do it, but they only did one, and Joe Schmelly said they need to do more, and they haven't done anything more.
And that's dating back to a meeting in June, so
Yeah.
I think at this point, I think it's safe to take them off the agenda. 28 Croton Avenue.
All right, so this one was last before the board in October, but since that time, we have
Yeah,
not
heard
received any updates or.
Okay, so this would be the third meeting.
Yeah.
Since then, again, just looking at the board, my recommendation would be if we had 3 meetings right now where we haven't heard anything, just, let's look to where we are at the next meeting. If we've not heard from them by then, it would make sense to remove them from the agenda. Is that it? That's it.
That's it.
Okay,
So the only one we're removing now is 65 Main.
right.
Be in 173, 175, one more meeting.
Right.
I'm gonna give 28 Groton Avenue one more meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to.
Oh, Before you do that, you tabled the minutes at the beginning of the meeting. I think you have
Oh.
a form now that might be able to,
We have, we have a forum of people who were at the last meeting, we do.
I think so,
We had, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong sheet.
right? Or maybe no.
We might. We had, present, we had myself, Michael, Brenda and Carl over here. Yeah, so we have a quorum. So, of the people whose names I just noted, we have a motion to approve, if you review the minutes from last month that Jamie sent out, a motion to approve last month's minutes.
Michael Aronson, motion to approve last month's minutes.
Brenda Barbara, second motion.
Okay, any objections among that group? No objections, the motion carries, and the minutes are approved. I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Motion for adjournment.
Second.
Michael Aronson, second.
Objection? Sure. No?
Nobody.
Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys very much.
We're adjourned, but what's going on?
Wait.
Start something.